As you may or may not know, my wife and I just got back from Vegas. It was a great trip. We ate, we drank, we had a blast. But then we got home and looked at the credit card, and I gotta say, it doesn't matter how much fun you're having, $25 for a drink is a ripoff. Frickin' Vegas. I hate getting ripped off, and so do the lads over at Harry's. They spent years watching the razor blade companies rip people off and said, no more. Not all heroes wear capes, my friends, and they want to prove that they're legit by offering you hot dogs a $13 trial set for just $3 at harrys.com/RTG. I've been telling you about them for months, and I'm genuinely proud to have Harry's as a sponsor of this show. I wasn't kidding. The plastic, futuristic-looking crap razors you get at the store are overpriced and they're poor quality. Harry's blades are crisp, clean, and classy. They're the kind of razor you'd expect your grandpa to have on his bathroom counter. And most importantly, they work. Shave after shave, they're so smooth, they're precise. I used to go through the crappy store blades all the time, but Harry's are built to last. And they're not just better quality than the other names, they're more affordable. And they deliver. Just set your schedule, and for as little as $2, new blades, shaving creams, lotions, everything you need, right to your door when you need it. I genuinely cannot think of a reason not to try Harry's. And I'm not just saying this because they're sponsors. They're the best shaving supplies I've ever used. Try them out, and if you're not happy, your shave's on them. And unlike the other subscriptions, they're really easy to cancel if you want to too, which is a nice bonus, but believe me, you're not going to want to cancel. Getting ripped off isn't funny. Switch to Harry's. Get started with a $13 trial set for just $3 at harrys.com/RTG. That's harrys.com/RTG for a $3 trial set. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Remember the Game. It is my retro gaming podcast where every week a buddy of mine and I sit down and we geek out about the games we played back in the day. My name is Adam Blank. Thank you so much for listening to the show. And this week it is episode 170. And we're actually not talking about the games we played back in the day. We're talking about the strategy guides that told us how to play games back in the day. My guest this week is Doug Walsh. And Doug is a former strategy guide author. He spent 18 years teaching us how to play video games via his work over at Brady Games. If you bought one of their strategy guides back in the 90s to 2000s, there's a pretty good chance that you enjoyed Doug's work at some point. Obviously, YouTube and the internet ended up kind of killing off the strategy guide industry. And when Doug lost his job as a strategy guide author, he wrote a memoir about his time in the business. And his memoir is called The Walkthrough: Insider Tales from a Life in Strategy Guides. And I have read it, and I cannot recommend it enough if you're interested in what went into writing these guides back in the day. And I'm not getting paid to do it. This was not like a paid promotion or anything like that. Doug actually reached out to me a couple of months ago now and said that he enjoys Remember the Game. And it was nice because I get a ton of messages like that from people being like, hey, love your content, would love to collaborate, but they don't know who the fuck they're talking to. Doug actually referenced jokes from Remember the Game in his email. It was obvious that he really has listened to the podcast in the past. We got to talking, and yada, yada, yada. He came on the show to talk about his time as a strategy guide author. And I'm not going to lie to you guys. I enjoyed this conversation so fucking much. This episode is a lot like a couple of the other ones I've done where we interviewed like Nicholas Pickless, former host of Video and Arcade Top 10. We interviewed Summoning Salt, who's kind of a speedrunning authoritarian, and he's also the current world record holder for the fastest ever knockout of Mike Tyson and Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. So you can find those interviews back in our archives if you're interested in those. And that's what this one is. And I don't have a lot of experience as an interviewer, but Doug was a great guest, and I really think this is a great episode of the podcast. I'm proud of it, and I hope you nerds enjoy this one. It's a bit of a change of pace, and we'll get there in just a minute, because speaking of things that I'm proud of that I hope you enjoy, it's time for yet another edition of the Remember the Game infamous intro. And if you're new to the podcast, welcome aboard. Consider this your warning. Our intros are kind of long, but they're not boring. It's fun. This is like the story page in the instruction manuals back in the day where they had like a 2-page explanation of why you're doing what you're doing, and then they get into stuff like how to set up your console and safety warnings. Remember manuals always had that? They always, I guess because you never know when it's someone's first game, but like every instruction manual would have the like, plug your PlayStation console into a power outlet. Turn the power on. It was like, anyway, the intro is less boring than that. Anyways, we have merchandise, hoodies, t-shirts, coffee mugs, tank tops, posters, all kinds of cool cool stuff. There we go. All rocking rad ass art drawn by my man Joe over at 4545creative.com. You can find all of our merchandise at rememberthegamepodcast.com. If you're interested, it is a great way to support the podcast and look cool. And of course, if you don't want to look cool, if you don't like clothes, you can always support us on Patreon. And it is I truly feel like we might offer the most value of any Patreon in the history of existence. For only $2 a month, you get 2 additional podcasts a week. So you're paying 50 cents a week, 40 cents a week, and you're getting 2 more podcasts every week. You get exclusive access to both my gaming discussion podcast, Expansion Pass, every Thursday, and my gaming news podcast, Game Patch, every Friday. And you also get instant access to well over 100 previous bonus episodes. Game Patch, every Friday, we look at all the biggest news in modern gaming. I add into my opinions and throw some profanity on top and all that kind of shit. And Expansion Pass is a different show every week. We do game rankings. We look back at characters, consoles. We do hypothetical conversations. We do some comedy episodes. There's game reviews. This past week on Expansion Pass, I counted down my top 10 must-play retro video games. I didn't pick my favorites. I tried to pick 10 games that encompassed as many genres, consoles, eras, developers as possible. It was tough. It was very controversial. I got a lot of feedback on this episode, both good and bad. And God damn it, I stand behind the list that I worked very hard to build. And as is becoming tradition, here is a sneak peek of last week's Expansion Pass, my top 10 must-play retro video games. And I'm going to keep it going. I got another comment to read here in a second. But my number 9 must-play retro game of all time. Is a pair of games, and that is Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue, and I guess Pokemon Yellow, even though I never played that one growing up. For the original Game Boy, Dusty Salad wrote into us on Patreon and said, besides Earthbound, which was already mentioned in another comment, my must-play retro game would be Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal. These games took the originals and perfected them in every way. They added a perfect amount of new Pokemon with 100. They improved the sprites of the Pokemon, even animating them in Crystal. And they have the best post-game of any Pokemon game, which unlocks the whole Kanto region. To top it off, your final boss is Red, the trainer which represents the player from the first Pokemon games, who you fight at the top of a freaking mountain. Well, fucking spoilers. Dusty said, no, I'm just kidding. I fuck it, yeah. Listen, I've never hidden, like, I agree with you that a Pokemon game needs to be on the list, Dusty Salad, but I'm going with Red and Blue and Yellow. I've never hidden the fact they are still my favorite Pokemon games. So that was last week's episode, and for this week, I'm going to do another game review, and it's a must-play current video game, at least in my opinion, and that's Metroid Dread for the Nintendo Switch. I've played through it twice now, once on normal, once on hard. I have a ton to say about this game, and as always, all of my Expansion Pass game reviews are 100% spoiler-free, so you can listen to them without having anything ruined for you, I promise. So again, $2 will get you instant access to all those podcasts, plus new episodes every Thursday and Friday, plus access to our Discord, which is really growing and it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of chirping and shit in there. It's good, but like no toxicity. It's really fun Discord. The chance to vote in our Patreon poll at the beginning of every month. You can submit comments to be read on all of our podcasts. You can DM with me as much as you want, and you get a shout out and get to hear me mispronounce your name like I'm about to do to most of these people. A huge thank you to all of our newest Patreons: Charles Robinson Jr., Austin Cook, Nintendope, Kyle Shrev, Sure, I fucked that one up. Matthew Salmon, AJ Bridges, Jeremy Jenkins, and Cedric Lacroix. Thank you all so much. Welcome to Remember the Game Industries. Your support means the world to me, everybody. Patreon.com/Remember the Game. There's a ton of value. Plus, I'm live streaming the recordings of Expansion Pass and Game Patch for the rest of the month exclusively to Patreon. So if you sign up, you can watch those live streams if you're interested and actually see me record the shows. Anyway, yeah, patreon.com/Remember the Game. I have a P.O. box. You can find the full address on our website. If you're interested, just send me a postcard or a letter, something little. Don't send me big giant gifts. I appreciate them, but spend your money on you, or give it to charity, or fucking throw it at birds or something. Don't. I was going to say don't feed it to fish, but some fish are evil. Anyway, and I'm on Twitch, and I'm trying to get on there a little bit more. Twitch.tv/Remember the Game. If you're interested in checking it out, just follow. It's free. It'll tell you when I'm online, and then you can come by and hang out. We've had more and more people coming by the streams lately, which has been hella cool as well. That's enough blowing myself. Let's get this thing going by blowing some of you with blowing in the cartridge. It is our opening segment on the show. I read a few comments and questions from our Patreons, usually gaming related, but not always. And we call this segment Blowing in the Cartridge.
He blows all right. He blows big time.
That's it, honey. Get into the spirit.
Let's blow. Our first blower this week is Chris Coplin, who wrote in and said, I've been hearing a lot about people complaining about how difficult Metroid Dread is, especially journalists and renowned developer David Jaffe. I can appreciate it when games offer difficulty modes, but I don't think developers should be expected to put them in just so people can complete their game without putting in the work if that's their intent. Where do you sit on the criticism of games that only offer one difficulty, especially when that difficulty expects players to, quote, get good? I'm a believer in the fact that video games are art. And I think that game developers are artists and they should be allowed to make their game however they want. If you want to, Celeste is one of the best video games of the last 15 years, in my opinion. I would argue it's probably one of the best platformers ever made. And it's excruciatingly difficult. And there's no easy mode, but that's how they wanted the game made. That's their vision of their art. That's fine. I personally, I do think the right call from a business perspective is to make a game as accessible as possible. For example, a Celeste. There's going to be people that never buy or play Celeste just because it's too difficult. Dark Souls. Now, the thing about Dark Souls is that's their whole gimmick. I'm terrified of the Dark Souls games, but if they put an easy mode in, that probably wouldn't convince me to buy it because I'd be like, well, now I'm playing it like a bitch. You're supposed to play it on hard. That's how Dark Souls is meant to fucking be played. But so I do think that the right business call is to put in difficulty settings and make it more accessible to players so that someone that's not as good at a game could still maybe pick it up and play it. And I think when you set a game, a counter argument is Yoshi's Crafted World on the Switch. I thought that game looked fucking stunning, but I was so bored that I was like, this is too easy. And I understand that it's meant to be easy. It's supposed to be for children, or it's supposed to be a very accessible game, but I was like, this is excruciatingly, boringly fucking easy. So I would love to see a higher difficulty setting there. A game like a Celeste or a Metroid Dread. Maybe there is logic in putting an easy mode in it so that players that find it too difficult can tune it down and still enjoy the game. I think from a business perspective, that makes sense because you can sell it to more people. It's just like how some movies would be better rated R, but they pull back just enough to get a PG-13 rating because you're going to sell way more tickets that way. But having said that, again, I'm an artist. I don't think that a game developer should pull back on their vision just to sell copies. If you really think that hey, this game needs to be X, difficulty, or this game needs to be X easy, for people, for the game to really be the experience that we envision it being, then fucking mazel tov, do what you got to do. So no, I disagree. Yeah, I don't think that it's a fair criticism to shit on a game and saying there's only one difficulty. I think that's how it's supposed to be. If you want to say, I don't want to play it, that's fine. But to me, there's a difference between saying, this game just isn't for me because it's too hard or too easy, and saying this game sucks because it's too hard or too easy. I think Yoshi's Crafted World is a magnificent video game. That's just not for me because it's too easy. It doesn't mean it's a bad video game at all. And anyone that's saying that Metroid Dread is too hard, you're more than entitled to your opinion of saying the game is too difficult, but you're wrong if you say that it's a bad game because of it, because it's not. It's a fucking great video game. And I won't be swayed by it. I won't be moved off that opinion ever. So, thanks. I can't stand Jaffe either. I fucking can't stand that guy. But thanks, Chris. Good stuff. Good A wrote in, and I don't often read play one, remake one, erase ones in this segment. That's the next segment here on the show. But Gooday wrote in and said, Horizon Forbidden West, God of War Ragnarok, Spider-Man 2. You can play one, you can remake one by giving it to another developer, and you can erase one. The series ends. No other games will ever be released. Whew, that's tough. Okay, well, I'll play Spider-Man 2 simply because Venom's in it, and there's no fucking way I'm erasing a game with Venom in it. So then I got to remake... Okay, I'm going to remake God of War Ragnarok and erase Horizon Forbidden West, but I don't want to. Please don't take that as me shitting on Horizon Forbidden West. That game is great. It's more of God of War left me hanging at the end, and it was like, well, they've got a new story set up, whereas Horizon Forbidden West is like a new game in the Horizon series, but Horizon Zero Dawn would stand on its own, and you'd be like, all right, well, that was a fun game. Whereas if you finish the God of War from the PlayStation 4, you're like, well, now what the fuck happens? You got to know. So I'm going to remake God of War and erase Horizon, but I don't want to. Fucking Gooday with your vicious play one, remake one, erase ones. Chris Cantrell wrote in and said, hey, Adam, I think I'm going to go in a different direction with my question this week. It kind of goes in line with one of your Patreon polls because I'd like to see you talk about wrestling sometime. I want you to pick a favorite wrestler from the current roster of AEW and a favorite wrestler from WWE. My favorite AEW wrestler right now is Malachi Black, just because he comes with an air of legitimacy and I love his persona. And with WWE, I'd have to go with Finn Balor because I'm such a mark for the demon character. I also love Finn Balor as well. But Chris, to answer your questions, in WWE, I'm going to catch shit for this, but my favorite wrestler is probably The Miz because I love snarky little chicken shit heels, and The Miz is so good at it. But I'm a huge Asuka fan. So Asuka's my favorite wrestler in WWE. Miz is my favorite personality. And then in AEW, MJF is my favorite wrestler in any company right now. He's literally the exact character I dreamed of being like as a kid is MJF. I think he's fucking phenomenal. And I'm also a big Hangman Adam Page fan as well. So there you go. God, I love pro wrestling. Leakified wrote in and said, with all the nostalgia of our childhood, what game besides Ninja Turtles turned your favorite cartoon, TV show, or movie into a video game? Mine has to be DuckTales, The Simpsons, and Rugrats. You know what? Actually, I didn't even have to think about this one for very long. It's Spider-Man 2. The Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 2 with Doc Ock, the video game they made out of that. I fucking love that game. I played so much of that game on the original Xbox. I think it's magnificent. Spider-Man 2 is my pick. Mecha Robo Hamster said, so this is a dumb question, but you've stated many times that you're not a big movie person. But with Halloween around the corner, I was wondering if there are any movies or games you like playing during the spooky season. I personally like to fire up a spooky movie every weekend in the month of October. So not only am I not a big movie person, but if anyone's newer to the podcast and doesn't know, I'm actually a pretty big chicken shit when it comes to scary things. I'm slowly getting better. But you know what? It's funny you ask that, Mecha. Every year, my girlfriend and I used to go see the new Saw movie when they would release Saw flicks every year at Halloween. And I know that they got progressively, I don't give a fuck what anyone says. The first Saw is a great fucking movie. Every movie after that got progressively worse and stupider, but we just kept going to see them. So maybe we're fucking part of the problem. But I can't even think of another horror franchise. And I don't even know if you'd call Saw a horror movie, or some people just call it like murder porn or whatever. But I've never seen any of the Friday the 13th. I've never seen any of the Halloweens. I've never seen any of the, what other fucking, I know there's another one I'm thinking of, Nightmare on Elm Street. Is that what it's called? I just don't watch scary movies. I'm not good at them, but Saw is actually my guilty pleasure when it comes to scary movies. Clayton and I don't think I have one that I do like every October or anything though. Although I might watch the original Saw soon. I love that movie. Clayton Robertson wrote in and said, I have a lot of Game Boy Advance games and NES games and PC games, and I always have a hard time figuring out what I want to play to finish. I want to play them really bad, and I like the idea of it, but I always end up playing endless games like Hunt Showdown or Call of Duty because it's just mindless fun. How do you balance out your life to where you actually finish your games? Would you be able to finish them if you didn't have the podcast to keep you motivated? So I do like to beat most of the games that I play, Clayton. I've always been like that. And I try to stay away from endless games like a Call of Duty as much as possible. I usually have one endless game on the go at any given time. And that's like my go-to, like if I'm baked or whatever and I just need to space out, that's my go-to. It was, Tetris 99 was that game fucking forever. Before that, I put so many hours into Mario Kart 8. I was addicted to Minecraft back in the day. I play MLB The Show, but I refuse to get as hooked on it as I used to be. I think Back for Blood is going to be my new go-to, not mindless game, but just kind of endless. I just log in when I want to play for a couple hours game. But I usually try to stick to one because, yeah, I like to finish most of my games, and I feel like I'm almost wasting my time when I'm playing something that I'm never really going to end, you know? And you asked, does the podcast keep me motivated? Without the podcast, I actually probably think I would beat fewer games, but I would put more time into the ones I do finish. Because like right now, I rush through most games just to get to the next one. Like I just finished Diddy Kong Racing, and there's an Adventure 2 mode. And I really want to fire up Adventure 2 mode, but I'm like, I got too many other games to play. I got all the gold balloons on an original playthrough of Diddy Kong Racing, and I'm going to tap out and move on. Whereas if I didn't have the podcast and I didn't have all these games waiting for me to get to for the podcast, I might be like, you know what? I'm going to put a little bit more time into Diddy Kong Racing because I really enjoyed it. Same with Crash Team Racing. I played that not even for the podcast. I just played it because I thought it was awesome. And I 101% of the normal mode and then never fired up hard mode because I was like, I have too much else to play. And I know I'm looking at probably another 30 hours of trying to get good enough to beat this game on hard mode. But no, I've always been like that. I don't force myself to finish games. If I'm not having fun, I don't have a problem with putting a game down and being like, this sucks, I don't want to play it anymore. But I bet you I finish 75% of the games I start. Because that's just me. I pick one up and then that's the one I'm playing until I'm done. I usually have a retro game on the go, a modern game on the go, and then an endless like game, like a Call of Duty style game on the go at any given time. One and one. And then finally, before we move on from blowing in the cartridge, it's ladder time. It's ladder time. And the topic everyone is talking about right now is Nintendo's expansion pack pricing, where they're charging an additional $30 for Nintendo 64 and Sega Genesis games on the Nintendo Switch. And I'll be honest with you, I got a few comments about it this week. I'm going to share my thoughts about that on Game Patch Friday. When we cover Nintendo news, we're going to break that whole thing down and talk about what's included and how much it's going to cost you. Then I'll share all my opinions on it. But Evan O'Brien wrote in and said, fuck Kotaku. First, you publish an article endorsing pirating a brand new game and linking the software to do it. Then shit on Nintendo for charging more for Nintendo 64 and Sega games and for their controllers. No matter what console, extra controllers are going to be at a cost. It's like they forgot you have to pay extra for PlayStation Now if you have PlayStation Plus, or when Xbox Live and Game Pass were separate entities and you had to have both. Yet Kotaku seems to believe that they should all be included in the original monthly fee, and then they had the nerve to say Nintendo didn't respond back to them for a comment. Well, maybe they would have if you didn't enable people to steal their new game. Upon review of this, maybe it's me. Am I so out of touch? No, it's Kotaku who are wrong. Fuck them again. And shout out to anyone that gets that reference. Good job. And he didn't add that part. I added that part. But good letter, Evan. Quickly, you guys, if you don't know what Kotaku is such a fucking joke. If you don't know what Evan's talking about, Kotaku posted an article a couple of days after Metroid Dread released, basically saying that people are already emulating it in 4K online. I'm not calling you a liar, Evan. I didn't give them the time of day to click the fucking article, because I was like, I'm not giving you another click and some more ad revenue for your bullshit. Hey, I don't know if they actually said how to emulate it in the article. Maybe they did. I'm not saying they did or they didn't. But the simple fact that the headline said people are already emulating it is telling people, hey, with a simple search of Google, you could probably figure out how to emulate this brand new fucking game. And it was such a joke. And they semi-backtracked on it later, but they never took the article down or apologized or anything. You basically just came out and said, hey, people can steal this fucking game if they want to. It's a goddamn joke. It feels like everyone in gaming media shits on Kotaku these days, and they fucking deserve it. They're just ridiculous. How can a professional gaming news website, and I say professional with the biggest air quotes you've ever fucking seen, how can they come out and say, hey, you can emulate this brand new game, and then say Nintendo didn't issue a comment to us when we reached out to them? Of course they didn't, you stupid fucks. Like, listen, gamers are entitled. All right, there's a lot of them these days, and I'm a gamer. I'm part of the community. They're an entitled bunch, straight up. And it's not just gamers, frankly. People steal movies, music, TV shows, video games. They're like, well, you're charging too much for your creation. This is bullshit. I'm just going to go download it for free. That's not how it fucking works, you guys. I emulate old video games, mostly for this podcast, but I would say 90+%. Basically, every game I emulate, they're old games that I can't buy anywhere. If I can buy it off of the eShop on my 3DS, if I can buy it off the PSN on my PlayStation, if I can get it off the Xbox Marketplace, I'm going to, fucking on my PC, I'm going to buy a game, if at all possible, to give that money to the developer or the publisher. The only time I emulate games is just as an example, and I'm just pulling in Ninja Turtles for the NES, for example. I'll be honest, I'm emulating that game when I want to play it because it's not for sale anywhere other than at the flea market, and I don't care about like Nintendo and their developers and publishers. No one's getting a dime from that. That's an old video game. I don't mind that. But if there's a way to pay the fucking rights owner for a game, pay them. I cannot get on board with it. I cannot get on board with the idea of emulating games, okay? This Metroid Dread is a brand new game. And I'm telling you right now, and if you're listening to this, you emulate that game, you're who I'm talking to. You are fucking this franchise over straight up. And I can already fucking hear some of the people that are out there doing it. Oh, Nintendo doesn't need any more money. They already charge too much money for their online, and their games never go down in price, and this is bullshit. That is such a stupid fucking argument. You're the exact same people that are like, the Switch has no games. Why don't they make more games for old franchises? Because people like you fucking steal them, and then they don't get enough money out of them to justify the cost it takes to make them. Stealing is stealing, straight up. I'm a stand-up comedian. If somebody was taking my stand-up comedy recordings, or somebody was taking the podcasts that I work really fucking hard on to sell to my Patreons, and someone was publishing them somewhere for free, I'd be fucking pissed too. All right? Kotaku should be fucking ashamed of themselves. They're a fucking joke of a website to go online and say this brand new game, you can emulate it and it runs better. That is just such a fucking... I'll be honest with you. I'm not wishing unemployment on every person that works at that fucking website, but I cannot fucking wait for that website to crash and burn. And bet your ass, mark my words, it is going to fucking happen. Idiots. Fucking idiots. That's how I feel about Kotaku. Fuck them. Fuck them. And fuck you if you're emulating Metroid Dread right now. Straight up. Fuck you. I mean, I don't care. You're what's wrong with fucking this industry. Or you're at least a big fucking part of it. And that goes to anyone that takes movies for free, anyone that takes music for free. Of course, we all did it back in the Napster days. Times are different. Dude, I pay $12 a month now or something like that. And I have all the fucking music I want on my phone. It's not a matter of they already have too much money. That's not the fucking point. Guess what? Compared to some other people in the world, every single one of you listening to this right now, you have too much money. Does that mean that people should just be able to take your work and you should offer them your work for free? No, that's not how it fucking works. Anyway, again, I'll talk about my thoughts on Nintendo's expansion pack, their pricing, what they're offering with the Genesis and Nintendo 64 games and stuff like that on Game Patch this Friday, which you can probably fucking find on the line for free somewhere if you want to find it. I'm sure you can emulate my fucking podcast somewhere. Thanks to everyone that wrote in this week for blowing in the cartridge. I appreciate it very much. Let's get into our Smash Hit segment, the official game show of Remember the Game Industries. Play one, remake one, erase one. And a huge thank you to Classic Concentration from the NES for unknowingly providing us with the theme music for the show. The rules are simple. Oh yeah, and there's another example. The soundtrack to Classic Concentration from the NES isn't fucking available anywhere. So yeah, I'm using it. Eat me. The rules are simple. Each week I give our listeners 3 retro video games. They can play one as it was released. They can remake one as a modern game. The third game is erased from time forever. As always, there are no wrong answers, but there is a right one, and I'll tell you what it is in a minute. And I figured, seeing as it's October, Halloween's right around the corner, and Back 4 Blood, the online zombie survival game, is the talk of the town these days. It's fucking dope, by the way. I love that game. I thought, let's have a zombie game round of Play 1, Remake 1, Erase 1. We're going with Resident Evil 5, Dead Rising, and Dead Island. And whenever I pick 3 games for this, it's very difficult. I always hope the poll will be close. And I fucking nailed it this week because there's 6 possible combinations of Play, Remake, and Erase. The lowest vote was 11%. The winner was 26%. So like a 15% gap from last to first across 6 options. That's a tight vote. And Play Dead Rising, Remake Dead Island, and Erase Resident Evil 5 was the front runner this week with 26% of the vote. And that 26% of you are not going to like my fucking answer. But I'll tell you mine in a minute. Let's hear what a few of you have to say. Paul Rakowski wrote in and said, Play Dead Rising. Even all these years later, the game plays well and it's still a bunch of fun to run through a horde while clubbing as many as possible with a frying pan. I'll say remake Dead Island. Island, as there was some potential with that game, and there was just some fun to be had with playing with other players, but it felt very underwhelming, especially after the first few hours. I'm not sure what would have fixed it with a remaster to make it live up to the hype it could have had, but I'll say it's worth a shot, especially when compared to Resident Evil 5. I'll erase Resident Evil 5 without a second thought. I'm not the biggest Resident Evil fan, but I have enjoyed a few entries. This was not one of them. I did play it on release, and I didn't have a dramatically negative reaction. I remember thinking it was meh, and the companion AI was pretty terrible while playing solo. Also, Chris punching a boulder out of his way? Fuck out of here. Resident Evil 5 was a huge turning point, a huge negative turning point for the series, and though it was nice to see a return to terrifying form in Resident Evil 7, 5 disappearing would not be a loss. I don't usually read answers that are that long, but I thought it was well worded. And I got to be honest, a lot of people threw shade at Resident Evil 5, which I don't get. I don't agree with. Resident Evil 5 is a good game. I don't care. It's a fine game, but I guess different strokes for different folks. Not everybody likes Vaseline on toast either. Shout out to anyone that gets that reference. Kyle Shreve wrote in and said, even though I love the Resident Evil series, my original thought was to erase Resident Evil 5, but then I thought better of it and decided to remake Resident Evil 5. The Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes were amazing, and I'd love to see that kind of game in Africa. Tone it down a bit from the ramboing lickers on a train and uppercutting boulders, and instead sprinkle in some rotten, unnerving vibes from Resident Evil 7 on the engine of the Resident Evil 2 remake, and with that African setting, you'd have something special and unlike anything else in the series. So I'll remake 5, play Dead Island because zombies on the beach is cool, and erase Dead Rising. Not a bad game, but it's a victim of circumstance. So I love that, dude. Like, I just can't be convinced Resident Evil 5 is bad. I think it's a fun game. I will say, the idea of remaking it like Resident Evil 2 fucking turns me on a little bit. God, Resident Evil 2 remake is so fucking good. Chris Larkin said, definitely play Dead Rising. This game was a monster success and a big title for the early years of the Xbox 360. So much fun even now. I know everyone is going to erase Resident Evil 5, but I'd remake it. I'm a huge horror game fan. I picked this up day one and co-opted it with my brother and many friends after. Yes, it's one of the less liked Resident Evil games, and erasing it wouldn't hurt at all, but the story is actually pretty important to the Resident Evil timeline and explains a lot to me. Remake with less arsenal and ammo to go back to its roots, and I wanted to play Dead Island as I already own it and have yet to fully play it, but I've lived without it for this long and I can probably just play insert horror first-person shooter here, so goodbye, I'll erase it. Yeah, I don't know. That seems like it's not what I would do, but it does seem like sound logic. It's funny that you said that Resident Evil 5's story is pretty important to the Resident Evil timeline, because the only mainline Resident Evil games I haven't played now are 0 and 8, and I never finished 6 because I hate that fucking game, and I have no fucking idea what's going on in the Resident Evil story. No fucking idea. No clue. Maybe I need to play Resident Evil 5 again. Zach Shepard said, play Resident Evil 5. While it lost the survival aspect of prior Resident Evil games, I thought it was one of the best two-person online co-op experiences I had on the PS3. Me and my high school girlfriend played that all the time until we unlocked the Hydra shotgun and the other hard-to-get weapons. I'd remake Dead Rising. I tried it, and the controls and mechanics seemed a bit weird for me. The right team could make this into an amazing crafting-based action game. And erase Dead Island. It just played like a generic zombie game. I couldn't get into it, even though I tried multiple times. I will say, I fucking hate the controls in Dead Rising. I'll get to that in a second, but I fucking hate the controls in that game. Or at least I remember hating them. Johnny CCDC said, well, this one's interesting. I'm going to play Resident Evil 5 because I actually have it. I just never played it after my daughter was born. That's fair. Remake Dead Rising as it was on the last system I owned before my daughter was born. And then erase Dead Island because my daughter, who's now 7, when I asked her which of these she would erase, she said erase this one, and that's too damn funny to me. It is the scariest looking cover of the 3, I think. So that makes sense. And then Kaiser Dragon said, play Dead Island. I had a heap of fun with this one. Remake Dead Rising without the damn timer. And then erase Resident Evil 5. Although I love the Resident Evil series and I like Resident Evil 5, this game followed by its next numbered installment are the worst in the series. You know what? It's funny because I like Resident Evil 5, but I'm going to do a ranking episode once I play 0 and 8. But yeah, it might be the second worst. 6 is the worst for sure. Fuck, 5 might be second worst. I like 5. Like I said, I've got my picks, and they're not the same as the majority. 14% of you went the same route I did, including Game Nomad Misi, who said, I'm going to jump in and play Resident Evil 5. It was the first game I ever pre-ordered, and I had so much fun playing it with my friends on Mercenaries mode. It's really fun, but I'd rather see other Resident Evil games get the remake. I'm going to remake Dead Island. The remake for this game could technically be called Dying Light, so I accept it being the remake. I like Dead Rising, but it's going to take the fall for me this week. I loved playing it. The first one was really fun and interesting idea, but I got very frustrated with the stupid survivors walking themselves into danger and trying to get all 50 survivors saved. The cultists and the military showing up makes the game a lot more annoying than it needs to be, getting a worse ending on a great one because you got captured and couldn't get away. Good week. I like all 3 games, but that's how I'm running it. Yeah, that's the same, not same logic, but that's the same order I would go with. I'm going to play Resident Evil 5 because, like I said, I know some people shit on this game. I really do think it's awesome. I really liked this game when it came out. I stand by it today. It's not as scary as the other Resident Evil games, but it's a really fun video game. I'm going to remake Dead Island because I never played it, but I always thought it looked rad. It just got middle of the road reviews, and one of the big issues seemed to be weird controls and some bugs. So I'm going to remake it, clean it up, and give it another shot. And I'm erasing Dead Rising because I know a lot of you wrote in saying that you love this game. I was hella pumped for this game when it came out, and then I played it, and I fucking hated it. I tried it like 8 times, and I fucking hated it. So no, Dead Rising can eat my ass. That game, dude, what the fuck was that? State of Emergency? Was that the like mass crowd fucking shitty game on the PlayStation 2 that was hyped like crazy and then it sucked nuts? Dead Rising was a better State of Emergency, at least in my opinion. I fucking hated it. So I'll erase Dead Rising and I won't lose a goddamn ounce of sleep over it. What have I been playing? And then we're going to talk strategy guides. Metroid Dread, mostly. Again, I'll get into all my thoughts about it on Expansion Pass tomorrow, but it's fucking awesome. Diddy Kong Racing, I wrapped it up last night. I've done all the golden balloons. I'm not going to do the time trials or anything because I just don't have time. I'm going to move on to another game. But we'll be talking about that on Remember the Game sometime in the next couple weeks. And then I've been playing Back 4 Blood. I haven't played as much as I've wanted to because I had comedy shows all weekend, and I've been trying to wrap up Diddy Kong and Metroid Dread. But I've played 3 or 4 sessions online with various members of the community, and I've had a fucking great time. And if you're interested and you're on our Discord, there's tons of people in there looking to play. You can post in there and usually put a game together in about 15 minutes if you want to. So yeah, I'm really digging. I got more time. I'm going to put more time into it before I decide whether or not it's officially as good as Left 4 Dead, but I'm really digging Back 4 Blood so far. And there you go. Let's talk strategy guides. That's why you guys are here. Usually I give some of our listeners a chance to sound off on the game we're talking about before the podcast. This week I'm giving them a chance to talk about strategy guides before I talk about them with Doug. And I got a ton of comments from you guys. I'm going to rip through a few of these. Dan S. said, I'll never forget the feeling of excitement going through a strategy guide, looking at all the pictures, finding the secrets, reading the storyline. They were great for games you didn't have the patience to finish for yourself, or just to sit down and read through to squeeze a little bit more out of your game. I always felt they were cheating. Like, I never used one. I only used the Earthbound one, and I think I had the Pokemon Red and Blue guide. But I used to get them from my brother all the time, and I always just enjoyed reading them. Like, after I was done the game, I just found them fascinating to flip through. Titan 420 wrote in and said, I don't know if your guest wrote it or not, but the Final Fantasy VIII strategy guide went a long way in helping me master that game's battle system. It was the first RPG not named Pokemon that I ever played. Yes, I played 8 before 7. And if not for that Final Fantasy VIII guide, I may have swore off RPGs forever as too complicated. And now they're actually my favorite games to play. It changed your life. Just a Fish said, back in the day, this was the only way to 100% a game. I loved guides, especially in RPG games. I remember having the guides and my friends not having them and thinking I was awesome knowing all the tricks and not giving up all the info. Even with the internet, I still buy the guides for open world games. I guess I'm just old school. I kind of miss some of those guides now too. They're just fun to read. If I saw one somewhere for a game that I already know and I wouldn't be like, that I didn't know how to beat, I would pick one up if I saw it on the cheap just to flip through it and read it. They're fun to read. Strife89 said, I have the Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy X strategy guides in my house right now. I originally beat the games without them, but I've always wanted 100% both. And I definitely couldn't do it without the guides. The artwork in each is great too. And 1.21 gigawatts wrote in and said, the first strategy guide I ever bought was for the original Metal Gear Solid. The reason I purchased it was because I couldn't figure out how to get Meryl's codex frequency. And how stupid did I feel when I realized the case the game was talking about was literally the physical game case. Ha, good memories. That's funny. I guarantee you're not the only one that happened to. Either the fact that the code you needed was written on the game case, or that whole Psycho Mantis player 1, player 2 thing. Those, I guarantee you, they sold some player guides because of that. Let's talk strategy guides, you guys. I already told you that like this dude is officially a friend of the show, long time player or strategy guide author. Doug Walsh is my guest this week. I'm going to cue up some retro music. And when it shuts down, I really hope you guys enjoy this interesting conversation I had with 18-year strategy guide author veteran, Mr. Doug Walsh. Enjoy the podcast, everybody. Let's go. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Everyone that listens to this podcast knows about our illustrious CEO, my dog Molly. But the other silent partner behind the scenes is my wife. And let me tell you, my friends, a 17-year relationship with another person that has to talk to and live with you is a lot harder to maintain than one with a dog. We've had our ups and downs, and as you all know, a relationship isn't all sunshine and rainbows. They can be a lot of work. You get out what you put in when it comes to relationships, and talking to a therapist can be a fantastic way to put in some work. They can help you work through your issues, learn to communicate better, and even just provide you with an ear to bend when you need it. I've talked to my therapist about my relationships, especially when it came to my stand-up comedy career and how much I was away from home, and they helped me work on ways to keep my relationship strong even when I was out on the road. It turned out our relationship was actually better when I was out on the road, but that's a story for another day. And I know, right? Therapy. Who has the time these days? BetterHelp hears you, and they're making it easy. Fill out a quick form online, and they'll match you up with a therapist that suits your needs and that'll work around your schedule. You pick the meet times, and you can get your therapy fix from anywhere, over video, phone, or just chat. Become your own soulmate, whether you're looking for one or not. Visit BetterHelp.com/rememberthegame today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/rememberthegame. All right, everybody. So a special guest on the old Remember the Game blank phone this week. We're actually not on the phone. I figured out Zoom. I have moved up in the world. I got Zoom to work. Well, if you're hearing this, I fucking got Zoom to work because it's been an hour of trying to get fucking Zoom to work. But my guest this week is a first timer here on the show. Very special guest. It's Doug Walsh. And Doug, I'm going to kind of just shut up and give you the floor for a second to explain to everybody who you are. But you reached out to me a couple of months ago. About the podcast and about the idea of coming on. And when you told me what you had at least previously done for a living, I got excited right away. And I was like, dude, that sounds like a fucking epic podcast. So feel free to go as long-winded as you want. I'm just going to shut up for a minute. Let everybody know who you are and how you found your way onto this Zoom meeting with me on a Saturday morning.
All righty. Well, yeah, I'm Doug Walsh, and Adam, thanks a lot for having me on. This is great. Your show's so much fun to listen to. When I heard about your show and like the focus on retro games and like top NES games of all time, like I think was the first episode I listened to, I was like, all right, I got a story for him. I grew up playing games. Dad came home with an Atari 2600 in 1979, 1980, around then. And then shortly after getting out of college, I literally fell into my dream job. It wasn't writing for Nintendo Power like I thought I would do when I was a 13-year-old boy. But instead, it was actually writing official strategy guides. And starting in the year 2000 with co-authoring a Tenchu 2 guide for PlayStation 1 and then Banjo-Tooie for N64, right up to the demise of Prima Games, I authored over 100 official strategy guides for most of the Tony Hawk games, all the Gears of Wars, BioShock, Halo Reach, and finishing up with like Super Mario Odyssey and one or two others. So it was a complete dream job. I didn't have any technical skills, but figured out a way to marry that love of gaming that I've had my whole life with my writing ability and love of writing into a job writing 8 to 10 strategy guides a year for Brady Games. And then after Penguin and Random House merged with Prima Games.
That's so cool. Like, it's so wild because I guarantee you, a vast majority of the people listening to this episode have at least at some point bought one of those guys. I don't mean to by any means disparage your career or your legacy, but like I was always that guy that like I was like I hated using because I always felt like I was cheating if I went to a player's guide. So I remember I got the Earthbound guide that came with my copy of Earthbound, and I beat Earthbound using the guide, and it was great. But afterwards, I was like, I felt like I cheated. But my brother was obsessed with those guides, and so every year on his birthday, every year for Christmas, every gift, I bought him a player's guide for something. And it's funny, I was just telling him the other day about having you on the podcast, and I was like, I'm 1,000,000% sure that I bought him at least 1 or 2 guides that you wrote. And I was like, and now you're on the show, which is so wild. So everyone listening to this has probably bought one of those guides, or at least seen those guides, maybe took them out from the library, something like that. And I got to be honest, man, that to a lot of people, that probably sounds like a dream job. Like, to just, your whole job is to play games before they're released and then write books about them. Like, it sounds awesome.
It really was a dream job. And like a couple of things there, like when I usually say to people, if you bought strategy guides and they weren't for Grand Theft Auto or Call of Duty or like Street Fighter, there's a really good chance I wrote it. So that's like no joke there. But yeah, like people would, what always happened was like adult people, especially women, would say to me like, "Oh, my son would love to have your job," and I'm like, "Lady, your husband wishes he had my job." Like, who are you kidding here? No, it was a total dream job, and yeah, to know, like, even looking back now, to be like, like The Legend of Zelda, Super Mario, Halo, these like, these pinnacle like franchises that the whole world knows, to know that like, yeah, there's books out there with my name on them that were the official guides to those games. Diablo 3, I mean, whether you love Diablo 3 or not, like, man, that's pretty freaking cool. Like, yeah, it's not lost on me,
No, that's incredible. And it's funny because you mentioned that you just like, so you have a book, and we'll plug your book near the end of the podcast, but you wrote a book about your time writing books. Like, you wrote a book about your time writing player guides, which you sent me a copy of. Thank you very much. And I bombed through that in 2 sessions. I bombed through that I was captivated because I'm a lifelong gamer myself. Everyone that listens to this show knows that. I've always loved this. This is my favorite thing in the whole world, is video games. And as a kid, I would have loved to have like done something like that, or been a game reviewer, or wrote for Nintendo Power or something. And so to have your book and to be able to read this book, and it literally it explains like, hey, this is how I got into this hobby or this industry. This is how, my standing in the industry evolved over time, how I went from just kind of for lack of a better term, not necessarily a freelancer, but you just started out just kind of taking on the odd job here or there, to being like, this is my full-blown career until the end of the industry. I found it absolutely just, I could not stop reading this book because I was like, man, what a wild ride that is. And what I really love about your story, Doug, is that, and I mean this with no disrespect to you, like, you kind of just fell ass backwards into it.
Oh, absolutely.
Like
I literally. I'm sorry. No, I literally fell off a bicycle and landed in this job. Like, that is absolute true.
So I don't mean to spoil the whole book, but I would love to, like, I guarantee you there's a lot of people being like, how the fuck does somebody get that job? And, unfortunately that job's not as readily available these days because of YouTube and walkthroughs online and all that kind of stuff. But without giving away the entire book, yeah, how the fuck? How does a guy get a fucking job like that? Like, that's not something you go and find on LinkedIn or something like that.
No, and I mean, like, right now, I know there's like some sort of skeleton of Prima Games still existing as an online site, and I think they do like, here's your top 10 tips for whatever new game came out that week or whatever. But the first step would probably be Time Machine. Like, you're going to need a Time Machine at this point, because even I got to the point, like, in the waning years, whereas if I was playing a game for fun and had trouble, and it was like, I'd just jump on YouTube and have the answer in 5 seconds. And there was a moment where I was like, you're not helping your career right now by just like jumping on YouTube, but I get it. But no, like, it was really a matter of, like, for some people, I imagine you cold called the editor and sent in a sample, and like maybe eventually got a chance as a co-author, like in an emergency situation. But myself and each of the other authors that I know and really respect and worked with, we all got introduced to this through someone who already had it. So it's kind of a chicken and egg scenario. Like myself, I had met this guy, Tim Bogan, and I talk about this in the book. We happened to live in the same town, and he had an in because he used to work for Sony writing, he would be the person. So, all right, back up for a second. In the 90s, when you had trouble with a video game, there was a number in the manual. There was these things called users manuals that came with the game. And there would be like, hey, for tips, if you get stuck, call this number. Well, Tim was one of the guys who would answer the phone and give you tips for that, like Final Fantasy Tactics or whatever PlayStation 1, like Cool Borders 2 or something like that. And he kind of parlayed that into a job with Brady Games. And then I met him and he needed an emergency co-author. So he ended up introducing me. And then down the road, like I introduced Michael Lummis. I know my good friend Joe Epstein got introduced through someone else and he returned a favor. And everybody kind of paid it forward. I have to believe there were no more than like 20 of us writing these strategy guides. And you had Prima Games putting out 80 books a year, Brady putting out 100 books a year at the peak of this. And then you had like companies like Versus and Piggyback kind of coming in and putting out a few books a year. But like out of all these books, there was probably no more than like 20 to 30 people writing them. It was just very, very insular in that way.
Right. That's wild, man. And it's wild. Like, so I've always thought that, like, excuse me, I've always thought like when I was in like high school, I thought like, man, I would love to be like a video game reviewer. Like that would be like the coolest job in the world. And then I'll be honest, even younger, like well before I started doing, because like I have found some way to fucking manipulate my way into making a living talking about video games. Now I have no idea how the fuck this happened. But even back in the day when I thought about wanting to be a video game reviewer or something like what you did, I always thought that like, I wonder if it would hurt my love of the hobby. And I even worried about that when I got into this. I'm like, is it gonna, like, I'll be like, I think most listeners know, like, I'm a stand-up comedian to go with the podcast. And I used to love stand-up comedy. And I won't lie to you, like, I've become completely disenchanted with stand-up comedy since I started making a living at. I still like doing it, but I don't watch it. I don't listen to it. I'm like, it's a job now. Like, it's when I'm not working doing stand-up, I really don't look at stand-up. So I always thought, like, I wonder if game reviewers, player guide writers, etc. Like, I wonder if you guys ever think like, well, this is cool, but like, I don't really enjoy playing games outside of work anymore because I spend so much time doing it. Did you find that? Like, did it kind of take away the love of the hobby per se and make it into more of a job for you?
I absolutely love playing video games still. I play games every day. But to your point, there was this. I'm much more selective in the games I play. Like Xbox Game Pass is saving me so much money because every week I'll install 3 or 4 games. And as soon as they start to feel like, oh, this is a game that's like work, I uninstall it. Like I need something that's simple. Like every day I sit and play Hearthstone Battlegrounds because it's simple. I don't have to like, think about it. Like there's a lot of games that have come out the last couple of years that I respect so much, like Control. Like Control is great. Red Dead 2. These games are work for me. Like I can't turn off that part of my brain that wrote strategy guides for 18 years.
Right.
Now, every now and then there's a game that'll come along that like really kind of threads the needle for me, like Hades. I got on such a kick with Hades, couldn't stop playing it, was like dreaming about it, waking up at 4 a.m. and playing it and then going back to bed because I was waking up dreaming about it. And but other than that, like, I mean, the last game I think I like got 1,000 gamer score on was Wreckfest. So I need like, I'm much more on the like, I'm going to turn my brain off now and just like chill. This is my popcorn. Like it's more about popcorn gaming.
Right. And it must be nice because I mean, when you're writing the guides, like I assume you got to find everything. And like, I know there are so many games, dude. And I mean, it's obviously become a much more predominant part of gaming these days with all the giant open world collectathon, fucking go find 3 billion little, things like that. But even like back in the, I mean, you mentioned like Banjo-Tooie. I've not played Banjo-Tooie, but I played Banjo-Kazooie for the podcast a year and a half ago. And like at its like that game's just one giant collectathon and it was a lot of fun, but there were so many things that I just like the music notes, having to find 100 music notes. And I'm like, I'm missing fucking 3. And I always feel guilty looking shit up. So I'm trying to play through it. But at some point I cave and I'm like, I'm looking this up. My time is worth more than my pride. And I'm fucking sick of looking for this. Like it must have been like to write those guides, you had to fucking find every one of those things. And now it must be nice to be able to be like you said, well, this game's becoming work. I don't want to fucking play this anymore. Did you ever like when you were writing the guides, did you have like, was it on you to find everything? Like, did they help you? Like, did the game developers come in and be like, I know you're missing 2 notes, here where they are, like, just as an example, here's where they are? Or was it on you to go sit in your fucking room, Doug, and find every one of these notes because that's what we're paying you for, type thing.
Yeah, this is one of the questions I love when people ask, because 90% of the time it was on us. There were it would, like, and right now, like, my hand is twitching just thinking back to like the Spider-Man 2 game on PS2. It
I
was
love
like
that
with
game.
there was but like, I think I have like a fold out poster map in my book that's like a trifold poster of the whole city,
Right.
and there's got to be 300 call outs on there. And yeah, we had to find all those. Banjo-Tooie, we had to find them all. Now, some developers, like, hat tip to Neversoft with the Tony Hawk games, they would send me, well, hell, they would even send me like the code for the chip system. Like, they would send me the like almost like the source code, so I'd be able to parse out like point values and things. But they would send me, it started with just the gap lists. Like, here's a list of all the gaps and how much points they're worth. And that was like on Tony Hawk 3. And by the time I got done doing all the Tony Hawks, like Tony Hawk Proving Ground or 8 or whatever the hell it was called, they would actually, even like somebody in their QA department would send me screenshots with like illustrated, like, arrow, like, grind this rail, jump, ollie to this rail. So, but that was super rare. My buddy, like I mentioned, Joe Epstein, and he and I co-authored the Mario Odyssey guide. And I mean, just finding all those moons, I mean, it was like scouring the world. And that was, and I mentioned this in the book, normally, once I got done with Banjo-Tooie and Conker's Bad Fur Day back in like 2001, I did the walkthrough for all the guides. Like, I always wrote the walkthrough, I always soloed the walkthrough for whatever game it was. And, my co-author would work on peripheral chapters, or, the weapons, the bestiaries, the items lists, all that stuff, or the multiplayer. But a game like Mario Odyssey, when, we're on site for just a couple weeks with that game, it was just like, yeah, there's no way in hell one person can write the whole walkthrough for Mario Odyssey. And we had to like break that up and we needed each other's help finding some of the stuff. It was, I'll never forget, like in Mario Odyssey, one of the power moons you get for sitting down on a park bench next to a guy in whatever that city was called. I can't remember.
New Donk City. Yeah.
New Donk City. Yeah. And there was one, and I could not figure out how to get this power moon. And it was like, me and my buddy were like, for like hours trying to figure it out. And then finally, like, I was like, oh, I could sit down on this park bench. And then the guy was like all depressed, and he just needed a friend for a moment to acknowledge him, and you get a power moon for that. And that was kind of one of the moments where I'm like, okay, this game is special. And I know I'm getting off topic here, but oh my God.
Oh,
like,
that game that game's
what a game to go out on. Like that was like one of my last 2 or 3 guides, and like, what a game to go out on.
Yeah, that game is like, everyone knows, like, I have a Mario hard on through and through. I adore Mario. But like, to me, Mario Odyssey is the best Mario game ever made that's not Super Mario World. And I think the only reason I put Super Mario World ahead of it is because of my insanely strong nostalgic ties to Super Mario. Mario Odyssey is a masterpiece. Having said that, and I have 100%ed that game twice. Like, as it's one of my favorite games ever. The idea of having 2 weeks to find every moon and that, like, the darker side of the moon and shit like that. Oh my God, I would like this. I'll never play a video game again. That just sounds like torture. Oh my God.
Yeah, normally we would only have 2 weeks. That one actually did. We almost spent like a whole month at Nintendo for that one. So just to get it clear on that one.
So I had 2 questions to follow up on that. Number one, you had mentioned that, like, like a Neversoft with the Tony Hawk games, they would send you all this information and be like, yo, like, here's this, we'll help you out. But other companies were kind of like, you're on your own. Like, how do game developers feel about these guides? Like, do they look at them as like a positive or like a negative? Like, is it a necessary evil? Like, did they not like you guys? Like, I've always wondered that. Like, did they like these guides, or are these guides like a hindrance to them?
I think, this kind of gets back to that relationship between the developer and the publisher. So for the developer, I kind of feel like, especially towards the end, everybody just took us as like, you're not worth the money anymore. And it's just too much of a hassle, especially as games got to the point where like they're constantly evolving and like, well, what's the point? The book's going to be obsolete a week after release anyway, but back in the day, like, so Brady Games or Prima Games or whoever, they would pay the publisher huge royalties and an advance fee, like over $1 million, just to get exclusive access to the game. For the developer, I think we were oftentimes kind of like a nuisance. Like, why do I have to deal with you? Because we would fall onto some producer. Like when I was on site at Blizzard for almost 3 full months, 90 days or so, working on Diablo 3. and I'm sure his name is Matt Panapindo. I'm sure the associate producer who was kind of like in charge of like handling my needs was just wishing I would go away. I mean, he's trying to get this game done, and here I am like, oh, my build crashed again. Like,
Right.
hey, why isn't this working? And he's like, because, I'm sure he just wanted to like grab me by the shoulders and be like, because the game isn't fucking ready yet. Like, get
Yeah.
out of here.
Yeah. Well, and like you said,
But
like, so
the,
they're getting would get like paid a fee by, Prima or whomever, like whoever the player guide, what, like you, just round number, you're like, we'll give you $1 million and then X percentage of royalties in exchange for the rights to make the guide to your game. But the game developers, everyone working on the internals of the game, it's not like they're getting a kickback from that million. Their job is just to finish the game. So they're the ones that are like, okay, like, fuck off, Doug. I need to get the game done. And you're like, I get that, but I need to write the book about it type thing.
Yeah, and so that's normally how it was. Like there were some other developers that were super cool about it. Like I loved going to Epic to work on the Gears of War games, Gears 1, 2, 3, and Judgment. Where I did the book for Gears 4, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
Gears 1 through 3 and Judgment were so much fun. Like I loved going to Epic. We had great support. But like normally, like, kind of piggybacking on your prior questions, like, well, what if I can't find something? What if I get the way it would work was like, I would email my questions to my editor at Brady Games. They would then reach out to their licensing contact at the publisher. The publisher, when they got around to it, would then email the producer at the developer. The developer would then contact somebody in QA. And then the QA, by the time it got back to me, it was a week's gone by. I already solved it. Like so it was almost to the point where like, there's really no sense in even asking anymore. Like depending on the developer, some developers were fantastic and they get back to you immediately. Sometimes, like, again, like with Neversoft, I would be put in direct contact with them, or like on site at Epic, I could just walk down the hall and like ask, the producer, like, hey, I'm having trouble with this. But for other times, especially if we were dealing with like a title like with Konami or Capcom or somebody or Square, it was just like, you might as well not even ask the question, like, because you're never going to get the answer in a timely manner.
Right. And you're on a deadline, right? Like it's not like you can release this guide like a month after the game comes out. I assume they probably by and large launched, if not day and day with the game. They had to have been very, very close, eh? Like they were on a
They were
deadline.
day and date. They were,
Right.
yeah. And the tail, like, I know that like the sales cliff was like within a week to 2 weeks. It was like you're getting like minuscule sales after that. It's
Sure.
like it had to be on the counter, especially for big titles.
Yeah.
Back when people actually went into a store to buy the game. And that was another thing that killed the industry. I know we talked about YouTube and things like that, but once people no longer had to go to a store to buy the game, they weren't going to go to a store to buy a book.
Yeah, fair enough. Because I remember that. Like you'd go into like an EB Games, GameStop, whatever you want to call it, and like they'd have them right there on the counter in those like those plastic stands. Like you go up to buy the game and the player guide wrapped in plastic. And I love that they were always wrapped in plastic so that you couldn't open it and flip through and see like one quick, like you had to buy it to get it out of the that's clever. I like that. So then like, cause you didn't do like you didn't lay out the guide, did you? Like would you submit all that to like an editor or somebody that would then lay out the guide and how it would all be presented and stuff like that? Or were you in charge of all that as well?
No. What we would do is we would format the book in Word using different codes. Like this is a note, this is going to be a tip, this is a header for a tip. Here's my 5 different, my forms of bulleted lists. And so we would, in a way, quote unquote, design the book in Word with style templates. But then, these publishers had really, really talented layout staff and book designers who would come up and, really make every page kind of like its own thing. And, we were responsible for doing screenshots. We were responsible for mapping anything like in call outs. But in terms of, designing or laying out the book, no, like Brady Games, Prima Games versus Piggyback, they all have their own design teams that, like skilled graphic artists.
So then that's interesting to me because like you said, the game, like you want to launch the guide day and day with the game. So then how far in advance do you need to submit your finalized work so that they have time to, put it all into and print them and get them ready and ship them out? Like how much time did they need in advance to get them printed and everything and shipped out?
So back like, years ago during let's just say like the PS2, Xbox 360 era, it was always kind of like 30 days before the game release date. And
Okay.
it wasn't like I had to have everything done and all at once because, and I used to think that. I used to be like, oh my God, the whole book has to be done, by this date. And then I realized, well, an editor can't edit 300 pages in one day. They can't
Right.
lay out. So it was like, okay, just keep the conveyor belt moving. So, here's 5 chapters to hold you over. And then I buy myself a little time that way. But the only reason that we were able to make that work was because Brady Games, they were based in Indianapolis. They had a local printer that would, that they could kind of rely on like at the last minute to get a big order printed and shipped. After Penguin and Random House merged and Brady Games and Prima Games merged, Prima wanted to use like their printers were coming out of China now. So the lead time was so much more in advance. And then also part of that time that gets factored into that whole like 30 days before release, we needed to give the game publisher and their legal team a chance to go through and make any corrections. And sometimes this would be like, it like, or I should say readers would probably think like, this isn't the way you beat that boss, or, but they were more likely looking for, did we capitalize all their trademark names properly and things
Right.
like they're looking for the legal manners. So that was something that would end up adding time. And it got to the point, one of my major frustrations towards the end of this whole thing, like 2017, 2018, is that they wanted more time for the approval process than I was getting to write the book.
Oh, Jesus.
And that was like, it was like, what do you mean you need 2 months for approvals? I'm getting 3 weeks to write a 300-page book. Like, come on now.
That's so did they get final say in what's in like obviously like I assume that part of like when you like when a game guide publisher would cut a deal with a game developer or publisher, whatever, to make the game. I assume part of that deal is like, we can put everything that's in your game in our book, like any secret endings or twists or stuff like that. Did the game developer or publisher kind of have final say on what was in the, like, were they able to tell you guys, we don't want that secret ending in the book, or we don't want this in the, were they allowed to say they don't want something in the book, even though that's kind of what the player guide is for, is to put everything from the game in the book?
Yeah, this was a major source of like conflict between us. We would try, and if there was ever a book that came out missing something, I can guarantee you the author of that guide and the publisher of the guidebook fought like hell to get it included.
Okay.
The data pads from Halo Reach, I was going back and forth with 343 and Bungie, because that was like Bungie's last game with that, to get those data pads. I'm like, these are the hardest things to find in the whole game. And, we finally, after back and forth, I got them to at least allow me to write a bulleted list of cryptic clues as to where they were. Now, mind you, like the very first data pad in Halo Reach, you get off the helicopter at the start of the game. There's an invisible, I can't remember enemy names. He's running away from you. He's invisible, and he has one on his back. And it only appears, I think, on like the hardest difficulty. So, like, how can we not put that in the book? To this day, I mentioned Joe earlier. He did this amazing weapon section for Borderlands 2, where he found out how to like get all of the legendaries, and Gearbox basically, quote unquote, classified a number of these that took him like a week to find and figure out how to get and how to reliably get for the game. And they ended up like removing it from the book after he spent like a week trying to put them all in.
Man, that's like, again, I used to like reading the books like after I was done a game, just because like, especially because you mentioned, and we'll get into this later on, but you mentioned in your book about how toward the end the books became much more kind of formulaic and less creative, and a little bit, and like I remember way back like Skyrim, for example, or Earthbound, even Earthbound. Earthbound is the player guide that I use, and I know you guys didn't write that one. But like, I loved just like I would read that book like on the toilet as a kid. I would take that book with me and just read. I just found it fascinating to read, and I love that. But I assume players that bought the player guides to help them beat games and find everything in games bought them specifically because by and large they assumed everything from the game was in the book. So they're like, no matter how stuck I get, this book will help me find it. So that's huge. Like that would piss me off if I spent, $20 or whatever on a book, and then these data pad things aren't even like, that's what I'm looking for. And they're not in there. That would have been so frustrating, especially if you put all the time into finding them and fucking doing all that work. And then they're like, no, you can't tell everybody that. It's like, well, that's
Well,
fuck me.
it didn't involve me. It was a touch before my time, but I mean, the biggest case of this is the whole Final Fantasy IX strategy guide, where and I talk about how this ended up happening. It's infamous in the game, in this gaming world, this world of gaming, but is Square basically removed, I mean, geez, you want to say a third to half the guide, and we had to put tip boxes in saying like, go to the Square Play Online site for clues. And it was like, people just bought a $20 book, man, and you remove the third of it to direct them to a website that doesn't even exist anymore. Like, what the hell?
Jesus Christ. That's fucking wild, man. It's so funny because on our end, we just buy the books and use the books and read the books, and like, to see the kind of seedy underbelly of what it takes to get one of these books out. That's wild. Now, another thing you mentioned that's interesting to me is like, we've talked about this on the podcast ad nauseum. One of the great things about retro gaming is there's no patches. There's no, like, when you buy a game, like my Nintendo 64 sitting right behind me, I'm playing Diddy Kong Racing right now to get ready for Remember the Game. And like, it's nice that when I plug that game in, that's the game. Warts, broken, works, whatever. Like, the game is the game is the game. Nothing is changing. And you mentioned that like one of the problems with a paper non-updatable player guide is that as updates come out and new weapons get patched in or whatever, the guide becomes obsolete sometimes in a matter of weeks, but after the game is out. But you guys, if you had to get these guides done, say a month before the game released, just a round number, there must have been countless times where, like you said, you guys were using unfinished copies of the game to try to, like, did you ever run into instances where you submitted it and everything was done and then they were like, oh no, we actually changed the last fucking, this whole section of the game, and now you need to rewrite this part in like 2 days or anything like that? Like, did you ever run into that? Because you're almost dealing with like day one patches before day one type thing where they're changing the game on you last minute.
I got pretty lucky in that most of the time it was like, hey, like a Gears of War game. Oh, we moved this cog tag, but during approvals they caught it, and hey, like, we replaced it with a different screenshot.
Okay.
So it was like some developers were pretty cool about that. Like, as we kind of like wound things down, because I ended up taking off in 2 years. In 2014, my wife and I left, and I know you talk about travel on your podcast sometimes, and we spent 2 years bicycling around the world. So I have a gap there, and that seemed to be like right at the transition point from where games were kind of moving into this, like, everything's a service now, and everything. I mean, you want to get me to not buy your game, put open world survivor crafting on the title in bullet points, and I will not buy your game. And that seemed to be about the time when like everything started shifting in that way. So I got lucky in that, because like pre-2014, it wasn't as common, or the changes, because they had to get the gold master and all that stuff yet. Then again, the last real book I did before that was Diablo 3. And I had to rewrite the skills chapter for that book 5 times. That's why I was on site for 90 days, because Blizzard just kept revamping the entire skills system. And then we did go back to do the update when they released it for console. And then I went back another time for the Reaper of Souls expansion. And I hadn't played much Diablo 3 in that intermediary. And like, when we sat down, it was like, okay, this is a completely different game. The way the weapons work, everything works. It was like our original guide from just a year and a half ago it's garbage. Like, it doesn't even, it's almost like not even the same game anymore. So I imagine that's a lot more common now. Years and years ago, Brady Games was, they brought in all the authors for like a little 1-day author retreat. And this was about the time World of Warcraft was going into a beta. And they were like, oh, there's this game, we're looking to get a team of authors, keep in mind that this is going to be an evolving thing, like these MMOs, and we need a team of authors to kind of commit to updating this like throughout the year. Okay. For like going off into the future. And I remembered me and a few of the other authors just like pushed away from the table. They're like, I don't want any part of that. Because to me, one of the benefits of my job as a strategy guide author versus somebody who actually makes games, I was working on 6 to 10 different projects a year. Sure. I couldn't imagine what it was like. I'm stuck working on this one game for 3 years. Like, I can't even imagine what that would be like.
It's funny you say that. Like, we all know about the Cyberpunk fiasco from last year, where they released, CD Projekt Red released Cyberpunk and it didn't fucking work, and everyone was pissed off. And like, I know nothing about game development. As we talked about before I got this going, I literally had a hard time getting Zoom working to fucking do this call. So I'm the last guy on the planet that should be making video games. But my heart broke because I am an artist. I'm a comedian. I create, and my heart broke for the developers of that fucking game, because I'm sure they had zero intention of releasing something broken. And it was a certain, whoever you want to call them, the fat cats, the powers that be, the executives up top that were like, this has to release for holidays. We have shareholders, blah, 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 blah. And it broke my heart to think that, like, how many years of those developers' lives went into this game. And instead of being able to be proud of the fact, like, they could tell someone at a bar, like, oh yeah, I was, one of the guys that worked on Cyberpunk. Like, I assume most of them don't even want to tell somebody they fucking worked on Cyberpunk, because, a gamer is going to fucking throw tomatoes at them because that game was so broken. So like you said, at least, yeah, you were flipping between projects. I can't even, to spend years and years of your life. And I guarantee you that a lot of these game developers are very passionate. Like, this isn't, it's not just a 9 to 5 where they go in and put numbers into a spreadsheet. Like, they're creating something that they want to be proud of. And then to be told it has to be released broken, we'll fix it later type thing. I don't mean to go on a side tangent, but like, that's just one example that I really felt bad for the developers that worked on that video game.
Well, you just reminded me of, like, one of the memories that I write about in the walkthrough was I was on site at Shiny Entertainment, rest in peace, doing the guide for Enter the Matrix. And I cannot imagine how excited those developers must have been to be like, guys, we got the Matrix. Like, I mean, you got to go back, think about 2002 to 2003. Like, there was nothing bigger than the Matrix back then. And to think like, oh my God, we got the Matrix license. And then I remember it was like my last day there on site. The game was garbage. And one of the devs came into the office I was in at like 2 a.m. and he just looked like a shell of himself. And he's like, just tell me just be honest, man. Is this thing any good? And it was like, the cinematics are really cool. And that was like the best I could tell him. Like, it was like, no, it wasn't. And you can tell he knew, but he needed somebody to just say it. And I mean, I really feel for those folks who put that much effort into it.
That was one of my favorite parts of your book. Like, and like, you guys, we're going to plug the book at the end. I can't recommend enough that you guys pick this up. Like I said, I did it in 2 sessions. I read this entire book. It was just fascinating. And like, everyone yells at me all the time because I haven't seen any movies. I've never seen the Matrix movies. Like, I don't know anything about it. Everyone always yells at me. I think I saw the original Matrix once, like in high school, and I don't remember other than I remember the red pill and blue pill and the dodging of the bullets. Like, I don't know anything about the Matrix, but I do know how big it was. And yeah, you talked about that in your book about how, like, it was like, you're gonna be working on this game that has to do with the Matrix movie sequel thing, and everyone's all so excited. Then you were like, and it was just the worst game ever. And then for you to be sitting there in that specific moment in your book, and where that guy comes in and he's like, just tell me the truth, man, is it good? That breaks my heart, because again, like, it's game developers. I mean, I'm sure there are people that just get into game development because it's a job and they need to put food on the table, but I would be willing to bet that a vast majority of the people that make video games love and play video games. And like, it's probably they probably had this dream of getting into the hobby and then being the one to be like, I made insert great video game here. And to read that story and like, we all know, like, I talk about it. Listen, how many episodes of Remember the Game have we done about old movie video games where like most of them suck because they had to get them out to go with the movie, and they're just, we've all talked about them. There's more bad than good. But that Matrix story, man, when you told that story, the guy coming in and just being like, just tell me the truth, man, is it any good? Oh, ripped my heart out. That poor guy. Oh God. Was that the worst game you think you worked on?
It's up there. There was this one, I think it's called Death by Degrees. It was a Tekken spinoff starring like the Nina character. And I remember submitting the text for that. It was almost like kind of like Nina is doing like a Metal Gear impersonation, but all the controls, it was for PS2, and all the controls were involved flicking the the thumbsticks in various like directions. And I remember submitting the text for this book and being like, I hope it's good. I still don't know how to play this game. Like, I finished the whole book and I was like, I have no idea how to play this game because the controls were so bad. And the one thing I'll never forget about that, other than me saying that, was who was it? Tekken was Namco, right? Namco coming back, and during the approval process, we were talking about they needed approvals, and they kept correcting, like I would say, like a sentence might be like, grab the 3 grenades from the crate next to whatever, and they'd be like, no, it's not grenades, it's grenade. That's the official term. And I'm like, right, but we're in English, and if there's 3 of them, we put an S on it. And it was, it was just one of those moments where like so frustrating. It's like, okay, this game is not good, first of all. There should not even be a book for this game. Like, now you're doubling down on whether or not grenades is plural or singular. It was so frustrating. It was like, just get out of here with this project. I'm done.
Now it's funny because you mentioned in the book how sometimes like a game guide like publisher would kind of have to like take on some crappy games in order to get the good one. That's a thing in comedy too. A lot of clubs, they'll have to book an agent. Will have 2 shitty comics, and they'll tell a comedy club, you need to book our 2 shitty comics if you want our good comic, like that. The drawing comic. It's so I understand that whole mentality. But you also mentioned that there was probably 20 or 30 people at getting to do your job at any point. Were you ever able to just say no? Like, would that have just, like, if someone called you up and said, hey, we want you to cover insert shitty game here, and you're like, I don't want to do that. Like, did you have enough? Were you able to do that, or was that something where you kind of had to take what you were given?
I definitely, I got to the point pretty quickly where I almost had like first dibs. Like, it's amazing that the authors who did the most books, our genre preferences didn't overlap a whole lot. And I was kind of, I could do a lot of different games styles. I didn't do fighting games, and I didn't do like, big MMOs or, huge RPG type stuff, but everything else I can pretty much do. I said no actually to like a Resident Evil title once because I was just not a fan of those like tank controls from the PS1 era.
Yeah.
I was just like, no, on the Resident Evil front. And then I think I never said no to like a Call of Duty, but I definitely was like, well, I'm not really sure that's the best fit for me.
Right.
Like something like that. And this, mind you, I loved, Gears of War, third person stuff. I kind of had my say, but at the same time, if I knew like, oh, I still owe them 3 books for this year's contract and we're running out of time, then I would that's how I end up doing a game like Death by Degrees or, like, The Matrix. I was still a noob back then.
Right.
But like, I mean, to be honest with you, it also depended on the title. And if it might be a big title that I didn't want to do. Like when the head of Brady Games and the editor-in-chief called me like on a conference call, and they were all excited, and they're like, we want you to do the book for Halo Reach. I was like, kind of faking my enthusiasm on the phone, and I hung up and I was like, God damn it. Like, I hate Halo. Like, I did not want to do it. Like, I was like, this is going to be one of the biggest titles I do, maybe in my career.
Sure.
I didn't want to do it. And then, so I was like, because my memories with Halo 1 and 2 were just not the greatest. But then fortunately, some friends were like, dude, just play ODST. You'll like ODST. And I loved ODST. Unfortunately, Reach was a little bit more like ODST.
Yeah.
So I ended up loving it. It ended up becoming one of my favorite games that I ever worked on. But man, I remember like all I wanted to do was be like, no effing way. I do not want to do a Halo guide.
That's wild, because you would think, Halo is one of those franchises that you'd think people would be tripping over each other to be like, oh my God, I don't have to do, SpongeBob Bikini Bottom anymore. I want Halo. And you're just like, no, I don't want to do fucking Halo. I'll do SpongeBob. That's fine. I just wondered that. Like when I was reading your book, I was like, I wonder like how many times could you say no to a game before the powers that be would just be like, all right, well, we're not fucking calling Doug anymore. The fucking prima donna won't do any of these games. Like,
yeah, no, it never got to that. I mean, that's like, when I, at first I was like, just give me what you want me to do. Like, some like Mario Kart for the Game Boy. Yeah, sure. Whatever. Bring it on. Like I'll do anything. And then eventually I was one of a couple people that had, an annual contract that was like, okay, you're going to do, 9 or 10 books a year. And, sometimes, like one book, like Borderlands 2 or Diablo or something like that would count for multiple books on my contract because it was, such a huge project.
Sure.
But, I mean, shit, early on, like Oh, you're the Tony Hawk guy. Yeah, I love Tony Hawk. Okay, well now you're gonna do this like Sean Palmer snowboarding games. Like, okay, now you're gonna do these BMX games. So like you get pigeonholed, and
Right.
I remember complaining about it to an editor, and he was like, "Dude, these action sports games are your meal ticket. Like,
Yeah.
do not complain." I was like, "All
Yeah.
right."
And that was the other thing is like, I mean, like if there's, if there's 30 people writing these guides, there's got to be thousands of people out there that would love to be one of those 30 people that's writing these guides. So that was something that went through my head was I was like, yeah, do you ever like, maybe you can't answer this because maybe you weren't the one making the decision, but like, did the quality of your work ever play? Like, were they like, not you, but like, just fuck, Bill's guides always fucking suck, but he always gets them in on time, so we'll keep him around? Or was it like, did that matter to them, or like, did they care more about just making sure you hit your deadlines, or was like, you got a reputation as writing the good guides, so they're like, well, we're going to give you more work because we know that your guides don't suck? Like, did they? Maybe that's a dumb question, but like, did they care about the quality of the guides, or were they just making sure they were done in time, type thing?
No, they definitely cared about the quality of the guides, and the authors who could do a really thorough job and get it done on time and be reliable. Those were the ones who always got the first pick of the
Sure.
projects. There were some authors who would totally phone it in, or they didn't know how to write well. They could be good gamers, but they weren't good writers. They couldn't organize because we had to do the layout. I mean, a lot of this was also like project management,
Right.
because like as we moved on, like it would be multiple people on a project, and somebody had to kind of be herding the cats, right? So being able to get it done well, accurate, and on time, like that was the thing. And also there was something to be said for like knowing not to spend 50% of the time like polishing the last 3% of the book.
Right.
Like to know when, like, okay, is it perfect? If I had another month to work on this, then I can really finally get these last few details that I would love to add, but we just don't have time. Knowing when to kind of pull that plug and just like let it roll, that was a big thing that they appreciated too, because there were some authors who would be like, okay, I'm going to keep polishing, I'm going to keep polishing, I'm going to keep polishing, ignoring the deadline.
Right.
And it's like, all right, well, you kind of, and that's the same with artists of all sorts, whether it's visual arts or authors like writing fiction. It's like you got to know when it's done.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you guys were obviously like, it must have been such a specific window between the point where like, okay, the game is done enough that you guys can play what is quote unquote a finalized edition to be able to write the guide, but you also need enough time to submit it to the printers and all that kind of stuff. Like you must have had, there's such a finite window between when the game is done enough that you can write about it, but you have enough time to get it submitted to launch day one with the game itself. That's, yeah, that like, I'll be honest with you, considering it sounds like such a fun job, it sounds like an incredibly stressful fucking job. I have to be honest.
I used to always think that like what you said was true. Like there was like 1,000 people wanting this job. There weren't. Like
Yeah.
there'd be a lot of people who like within. I even this is funny. When I started doing the guides for Gears of War, my friend Jim was like huge into it, and I actually got Brady to hire him as a multiplayer assistant. Like he would come down to Epic, and we would sit in the room, the two of us playing against bots like for 12 hours a day.
Mhm.
And man, I'll tell you, like the sheen wore off real quick. Like the first couple hours, it was all wide-eyed and like, oh my god, I'm at Epic, this is amazing, I'm getting to play Gears of War early. And by the second day, he was like, dude, I don't know how you do this. Like this is not as much fun as I thought it would be.
Yeah.
And it was work. It was work.
I believe that. I've thought that. Like I consider myself lucky that like I don't have, like I work for I don't know boss. Like I just, whatever I want to play and talk about is what I play and talk about. Like I guess our Patreons are kind of my boss because they tell me what episodes they want, but that's it. I have no deadlines or anything like that. I have legitimately thought that many times ever since I probably about the time I got out of high school, and like IGN and stuff like that really blew up, and I was going to those websites, and I knew so many people that they would have given their left arm to work at those things. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning of the show. I was like, I feel like for a lot of people, this might ruin the hobby, because it does take a hobby and make it into like this is a job. You're sick of this game, tough shit, keep playing it, find everything. You're on a deadline. So, I mean, I'm sure, I assume you kind of made your own hours as long as you got the game in by the guide submitted by your deadline. But I'm sure you had to have had a lot of 12, 13, 14, 15-hour days with some of those fucking games. Like, I'm sure you had to be very self-disciplined to get that work done in time type thing, right?
Yeah, and that was one of the hard part. Like in your 20s, like I started doing the job when I was 24 years old, and at that point, like I'm kind of almost like getting off on the idea of like working all night. I work
Yeah.
30 hours straight and, 100 hours that week. And then, by the time you're in your like mid to late 30s, you're like, well, that's not good. Like, don't be proud of that. Like, how about
Yeah.
you try and get this down to a 5 or 6 hour a day thing and then celebrate the rest? Shoot, I forgot what I was going to say. There was something else there. But it was, yeah. So no, shoot, I totally forgot what I was going to say.
Well, I wanted to ask too, like, I mean, not to pry too into your personal life, but you mentioned the book
Yeah.
that you're married.
Yeah.
Like, was it ever hard on your relationship, like to be away that long and to kind of like, because like, I assume, like, did you ever play the games at home? Like, did you always have to go to the developer to play the game, or did they ever send you copies to be able to sit, like, at least from the comfort of your, like, at least be able to like have dinner with your wife and then go back to work, or did you always have to go on the road to do all of them?
Most of the time I got to work from home.
Okay.
Most of the time. Yeah, that shifted with some of the big titles. And that was kind of part of the reason why we ended up moving out to the West Coast, was because I loved going to Nintendo to work on titles there. And I thought like, hey, if I actually live just down the road, maybe I'll get more projects.
Yeah.
And we wanted to change anyway. When it became a problem, like Diablo 3 was a lot of travel down to California. But like my wife, and then oh geez, for Borderlands 2, we were supposed to go down for one day. It was like, listen, Gearbox is going to be really cool. 2K wants you to work on site because they're worried about like piracy, but Gearbox is going to give you a disc to bring home. So me and my co-author, we go down there. And we're just like, we have lunch with them, and they take us to some like ridiculous like boob restaurant like called Bone Daddies or some bullshit. And we're like, okay, yeah, I mean, it's Texas. And we're like, hey, we're gonna get a game and then go home. And then they're like, oh, sorry, you guys are gonna have to do this on site. Well, Borderlands 2 is a big freaking game.
Yeah.
So I remember I called the editor in chief who pays me, and I said, listen, I don't live in the Northwest and put up with Seattle rain from like November to May, so you can send me to Texas for my entire summer. Like, this is crazy. They ended up flying our partners down for almost like conjugal visit, like 3 weeks into the project. And so Brady Games was pretty cool about that. Like they flew my wife down to California when I was working on Diablo also. And, but yeah, I mean, I didn't, it sucked. Like, we didn't have kids, but we have dogs, and it sucked being away like for 3 to 5 weeks at a time.
Oh, dude, I go on the road for a week for like I've talked about that ad nauseum. One of the things I'm most grateful for with this podcast is that it's let me pick and choose my comedy dates, so I don't have to go on the road as often. I fucking hate going on the road, and I don't have kids either. I have my girlfriend and my dog. And like my girlfriend, I think she looks forward to when I go on the road, because she's like, it's a fucking break. But like to be away from a dog is just hell. And the poor dog doesn't, you try to explain, but the dog doesn't understand. And it just, fuck that. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
That sounds like torture. Okay. I had a couple questions. I had one question. This is going to sound like such a dumb question, but I had it written down while I was reading your book that I had to ask you. When you were playing through a game, and it doesn't even matter, pick whatever game you want, and you were like figuring out where all the collectibles, all the secrets are, stuff like that. This is just something that I need to know. Did you just have like a notebook that you were just script like, okay, level 2, third door on the right, go around the corner and behind the shelf, there's this collectible? Like, did you just have like, have you ever seen that meme of Charlie Day where he's got that clipboard or the bulletin board with all the notes and everything? Like, that's how I imagine you guys, at least in the early stages, and then you're like, okay, now that we know where it all is, let's figure out how to make it into a guide. I'm just curious, like, was there any organization, or was it just scribbling down as many things as you could find and then be like, all right, now we'll try to put this into some semblance of order? I'm just curious.
It was video. All video. Yeah. Usually, like, eventually it was all video. I also had screenshots. I had this macro taking screenshots right from the Xbox 360, and I had it run every 4 seconds. And I had it on a second monitor, and it just tracked my mouse movements. So like out of the corner of my eye, I would see like the little arrow like run up the screen, right click a button, and come down. And sometimes I would like pause in the game and like to get the screenshot, and that would be my notes. But yeah, I also did I was often hitting pause and then typing on on another computer, or I would have all the maps printed out, and normally I did it through video while going going over the video, but there were definitely times where I'm like writing on a map and putting X's on a map where I find everything like as I go through. Taking the screenshots though, that was one of the biggest hurdles because early on, like we didn't have great video. We were doing it from like mini DV camcorders, and then when the games went to HD, it cost a lot. There was a period there where it was not easy for the regular person to have HD capture equipment coming off of coming like right out of a debug system. So I remember when I did the guide for BioShock, the original BioShock, I had gone through the game multiple times, but I didn't have good screenshot ability and I didn't know about the macro thing yet. So after writing the whole book, finishing the maps and everything, my wife took a day off from work and she sat next to me as I played through the entire game, start to finish, and like finding every single thing that I needed a screenshot for. And I would like say, okay, now. And she would take a screenshot, like using my mouse and keyboard on another monitor. And then in like every 10 seconds, I'm like, okay, now take a screenshot. And then I pause and be like, all right, like when we come around this corner, there's going to be a shadow of one of the splicers with a bassinet. And like, I want that screenshot because it's super cool, because I just know all these things like, okay, the big daddy's going to do this. Like when he starts to turn this color, take the screenshot,
Yeah.
That was no way to do screenshots.
Yeah,
technology. Oh, but I remember what I was gonna say before when you were talking about like the hours and stuff. I would have all these people be like, "Oh, your job's so amazing. It must be nice to just like sit and play games all day." And I would say to them like, "Cause no, at 2 a.m, when I know that I'm gonna like blow a deadline because I can't save the fucking princess in the castle, like the job's not really fun then when the final boss of the game is broken." And you can't beat it, and you can't actually write about like the final boss strategy.
My God.
Darksiders 3 was the last book I wrote a guide for. And there were parts of that game where this was like 3 days before deadline, where the world would just like disappear and I'd be like walking through a mesh.
Right.
And it was like, okay, like I'm supposed to have this book done in 3 days. Like fun game. And when I finally got a build that actually worked, I really enjoyed it. But man, that was frustrating as hell.
It's funny. Before we started recording, we were talking about Game Rage and how I am Angry Adam has become a character here to remember the game. It's not a fake character. Fucking games make me so goddamn angry sometimes. But fortunately, and it's something I'm learning as an adult, is like if a game's really starting to make me angry, fucking just turn it off. Go watch baseball or go outside or play something else or just something. But I guess, yeah, like I can't even, dude, that's to me of all the aspects of your job that sound difficult, that was always the one, like reading your book, that was always the thing that stuck with me the most was like the idea of being stuck somewhere in a game and just being so fucking angry and then being like, I can't even stop. Like, I can't even walk away because I've got a deadline and I have to get through this somehow. And then to think that you're playing a copy that's not even done and it's unbeatable and you still have to find a way to, that just like, I'm getting angry just sitting here thinking about that. That just sounds so not fun to me. Fuck. Jesus. Oh.
Well, I'm not gonna mention the exact detail, but there is a story in the book about having to go to Electronics Boutique and buy a developer a new controller because I broke their fucking controller.
Yes, I do know that. Yeah. Fuck, that's so good. Okay, so I covered that. I really just wanted to know how you fucking wrote your notes out because that's something for me. So before we wrap this up, I wanted to ask you, like, obviously, and you seem to be quite at peace with it and happy with your life now, but like, I don't mean to belittle the fact that like you lost your job. Basically, everyone in that industry lost their jobs when that economy kind of went, that players guides went the way of the dodo and kind of died off. And we've seen that happen in video game. Like, I mean, Sega stopped making it's not a dig at you Saturnians either, but like Sega stopped making consoles and I'm sure countless people lost their jobs. I have said many times that I really think Game Pass is going to I think by the end of this generation, Game Pass will be the way we play games. And I think that other people will find a way to do the same thing. And there's no, like, as we all know, physical games are dying. They're not dead yet, but digital has become a huge part of, like, I buy digital. So like, EB Games is going out of business. We all know GameStop, EB Games, whatever you want to call them. I don't think they're long for this world, and I'm not celebrating it, but a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. And I think that part of gaming is technology, and part of technology is you either adapt or die. Like that's just part of as the industry grows. Do you think there was any way, I know you said that there's like a skeleton of the player guide industry still around today, but like, was there ever any discussion when you were in that industry of being like, well, why don't we transition to like a website where people could either go and we could sell advertising, or we could make a subscription model and just make all our player guides digital? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Because I know I can go on YouTube right now and look up where the last moon in Mario Odyssey is in 3 seconds. But like, if you guys had made a cool website where all these things would have still been in like one area with your fancy layouts and fun, like, was there ever a discussion of that, or were they all just kind of, we know this is a sinking ship and we're just going to get as much out of it as we can?
I think it was both. They did have some websites. They were like Brady Games and Prima. They had websites. They had some digital content, and it was kind of cannibalizing the guides. I remember, being like, "Oh, I finished this book. Good. I'm going to move on to the next one, or go on vacation." And I get an email and be like, "Oh, now we for the website, we need you to write the 10 best strategies for like the final boss." I'm like, aren't we trying to sell a book like on that? Why are we giving it away on the website? When I had the conversation with the editor-in-chief about me leaving to go on a bike tour. This was at the end of 2012. I said, hey, 2013, I'm still hoping to do this, but we're planning on leaving in 2014. And she said, I can give you a contract for 2013. I will try to keep you as busy as I can in 2014 before your trip. After that, I just hope, I don't even know if we'll have a job anymore.
Right.
And that was that was all the way back in 2012, the end of 2012, when we had that conversation. So the fact that it actually took until 2018 for them to finally die, and there had been many layoffs by then, and obvious, huge reduction in the amount of books they were putting out.
Sure.
So everybody kind of knew it was coming. As for the website thing, I mean, you said it yourself, people are still just going to jump to YouTube for 3 seconds and get that answer, Yeah. And then the thing is also to do what we were doing at the level that we were doing it, it costs money. Like, to have professionals doing it, you're probably not going to make that back on a website.
Sure.
And then one of the ways that we were trying to stave off the inevitable extinction of strategy guides was by making the books more like coffee table collectible books. Mm-hmm. And they were all starting to get packed. They were all becoming like hardcover. I mean, I did a book for Harvest Moon in 2017, 2018. And it was a freaking hardcover. Like, we don't need a hardcover strategy guide for Harvest Moon. It was like a glorified mobile game. So they were doing that, but they were also adding in developer art and concept art and interviews and packing in soundtracks. And I mean, they were doing a lot of things to try and make them, worthwhile. But then the other thing was that the sales team started guiding the decisions of what should have been editorial decisions. And like, oh, we need this book to be 300 pages to justify a hardcover. And I'm like, man, this book doesn't even need to be 140 pages. Like, there's no way. Again, that Harvest Moon book I did, it was a 20th anniversary collectible. Look at some of the pages in that book. Like, we blew concept art up to take up 2/3 of the page just to fill page count, because the sales team was dictating, oh, we got to make it a hardcover so we can hit this price point so we can try and move more units. And it's like, bad game, and the game doesn't justify a 300-page book.
Right. Yeah. I guess Blockbuster is always the example everybody goes to of just Blockbuster didn't adapt and they ended up dying. But I don't know. You're right. You're probably I bring up the web. I don't need, I said that in passing, but I think you're right. I think I don't know if they probably couldn't have survived. But now I will ask that gaming magazines are kind of they're a niche audience, but they're kind of seeing a resurgence. People talk about it in our community. There's a lot of independent people like myself that are churning out retro gaming magazines. There's a Sega magazine. There's a Nintendo magazine, because people are nostalgic for kind of that old, enough time has passed that people are nostalgic for it now. Do you think that'll ever, do you think there'll ever be a big resurgence in player guides where people are I kind of miss that. I don't want to go to YouTube. I want the fancy physical guide to flip through.
I hope so. I mean, now that I'm in independent publishing and writing and focusing on fiction, you keep seeing signs of rising physical books are starting to come back in sales, and ebook sales are kind of going down, and you hear people younger people liking to gravitate towards physical things because it reminds them of being a kid and having their parents read to them and things like that sort. So I think that's going to be there at the indie level. Now one of the things that we have to remember, with this whole death of Prima Games, was Penguin Random House. They're a massive company.
Yeah.
and there's a company that owns them. When I got the email saying that I lost my job, I was waiting for an email saying, okay, you're going down to Bend, Oregon to do the guide for, what is it, like Days Gone or whatever. I think the studio's in Bend, Oregon. And I couldn't wait because like I was really into mountain biking, and Bend's a great place for that. And instead I get this email from some guy in the parent company in London, basically saying like, effective immediately, Prima Games is going out of business, and, wrap up any projects. And then we're like shutting the doors in February.
Right.
And it was just like, oh, I just lost my job via email from a guy I've never heard of, from a parent company, like 2 levels removed from the one I actually wrote for.
Right.
So that was interesting. And it just reminds you like, oh no, this is just business decision. It's not, these aren't gamers. It's not like,
not at all. Not at all. They're just, they care about the bottom line, and that's it. So, I wanted to ask you about what you're writing these days. And this is going to be kind of my segue into that. Would you ever consider, right, if you ever played a game, or if a game ever came along and you were just super into it, like I know you mentioned like you loved Halo Reach and BioShock. I adore the BioShock games and stuff like that. Would you ever consider doing one independently? Have you ever like one more fight, like a boxer that comes out of retirement? Have you ever considered coming back and just writing one more guide on your own, or are you done and you're just ready to move on to the next chapter of your life?
No, I'm on the next chapter at this point. I am in talks with somebody about a gaming adjacent writing project, which has me very interested in. But 6-8 months after Prima closed, the former publisher, the head of Prima Games, who was the head of Brady Games, he was just like, hey, I'm thinking about like, getting the gang back together again. I'm going to go after like the Gears 5 license. And he was like, you'd be obvious choice. And I was like, okay, well, it's not going to come cheap because and he's like, well, I'm not going to be able to pay you what we used to pay you. And I was like, well, like, what are we talking? He's like, $5,000. And I'm like, there is no way in hell I am doing the Gears of War 5 guidebook for $5,000. There's an absolute, not to, like, I know that can sound like, elitist or whatever, but like, listen, there's way too much work and way too much headache dealing with a particular person involved in that Gears of War 5 project. That was not going to, that was not going to happen. But no, now these days I've since focused strictly on fiction. When Prima Games died, in my drawer for 10 years was the outline to the memoir that I ended up writing. Mm-hmm. The walkthrough Insider Tales from a Life and Strategy Guides, which is the book we've been referencing. Yeah. And I didn't feel the huge gut punch of having lost a job because I had this to immediately focus on. Like, I think like I had one good cry because it was like a dream job that finally came to an end. Sure. And I think like 2 days later, I started writing this memoir. And that allowed, like, over the next few months, that allowed me to like kind of relive all the good memories and not focus on the fact that it doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
But since that came out in 2019, I've been working on a couple of novels. My next one is kind of a coming of age thriller set in Hawaii, and that is releasing on November 16th next month, called called Shadows of Kalalau. So yeah, that's what I'm focused on now.
Okay. Well, that's, excuse me, that's excellent. So I wanted to plug that. So, obviously you have a website. So it'll definitely be in the description of this podcast if you guys are interested. I can 1,000,000,000%, and this is not a paid advertisement. I was not given a dime to do this. Doug was kind enough to send me a digital copy of his memoir, the walkthrough about his life writing player guides. And I cannot endorse this book enough. If you guys are into this type of stuff, and I know many of you are, that's why you're listening to this podcast and you're into this community, just to like what Doug talked about, what we talked about over the last hour is just a sampling of the stories and stuff like that is in this book. It's so well written, and it's just so fascinating to hear about what happened on that side of these player guides that we all grew up reading so much. And I know personally, Doug, like I'm a pretty avid reader. I'm a kind of a nerd. That's one of the few things I do that isn't video games or comedy, is I love to read. And I'll be certainly keeping an eye out for your writing, because I thoroughly enjoyed the walkthrough. So, well, it will all be in the description of this podcast. We'll get the plug in now. Doug, where can people find your workings? Where can people find what you're up to?
All right, Adam. Thanks so much for the praise on the book. It was a lot of fun and nice to hear that. Everything is at DougWalsh.com. WALSH. And the books are all available in ebook, paperback, and audiobook. And yeah, the next one coming out next month is it's getting some good early buzz. So I'm excited. But of course, the walkthrough is the one I'll probably always love the most because it was about what I did for 18 years.
Yeah. Oh, I can't imagine. It's like I've never done anything for 18 years other than play video games. I haven't done anything for 18 years. But yeah, to know that that's basically like that's the closure of that chapter of your life and to move on. That's an emotional thing. So, listen, man, I've been looking for interesting guests to have on the show on occasion. And when I will lie to you guys, like I'm not trying to suck my own dick here, but I get emails from people from time to time being like, hey, I worked on this indie game and I'm not trying to shit on their indie game, but like this game that no one's heard of that never existed. I'd love to be on your show, but they don't know anything about my show or anything like that. And I understand that that's part of promotion and publicity and getting your name out there and stuff like that. But when you initially emailed me and specifically referenced things from the podcast, like it showed me I'm like, yo, this guy has actually listened to some episodes of my show. And right away I was fascinated. And then once you and I got talking, and we've been kicking this idea around for quite a while, it's just been a matter of making the timeline up to sit down and have this chat. I was so excited to have this. And I'm going to be honest, like, who knows, maybe I'll screw it up in the editing and it won't work or something like that. But for my money, you guys, this is probably going to be episode 170. And in 170 episodes, this might be, from a personal perspective, the most fascinating episode of this podcast that I've ever done. I can't thank you enough for reaching out and for taking the time to do this, Doug. And I wish you all the best in your future endeavors as a writer. That's fucking awesome. Oh, quickly, I wanted to ask you, what are you playing these days other than Hades? Like, you said you still play games all the time. Is anything kind of floating your boat?
I cannot break myself of my Hearthstone Battlegrounds habit, and
Yep.
they just released a whole new patch with all new content recently. But I just gave I don't even know how to pronounce the freaking game. Arrow. It was like one of the
Dude.
Xbox Live for Gold games.
Yeah, when I tried to promote that game on Game Patch on our gaming news podcast, I was like, I don't know how I'm supposed to say this. Arrow? Like, I didn't know how to say it either. But
It reminds me of Thumper meets Rez. And like it's fun, it's tricky, but yeah, like I've only just scratched the surface. I was out of town all week last week and haven't played much lately, but yeah, no, that's kind of what I'm playing. And Hades, because I am told that I'm not allowed to stop playing Hades until I get 10 clears.
yeah, I've been told that too. You have to clear it 10 times.
Yeah.
Hades, dude, people talk about Hades and I remember when I finally played it, I was like, well, okay. Is it that good? And then you start playing it and I know nothing. Infamously know nothing about the lore. Everyone makes fun of me because I don't know anything. I don't know who any of these gods are and I was like, dude, this game is fucking awesome. So
Yeah.
that's great. And then is there anything coming up that you're like, is there anything in the next, like, I'm excited for Back 4 Blood that's coming out in a week. I can't wait to play that game. And Halo Infinite has got me hot and horny as well.
For me, it's all Forza Horizon 5.
Is that, yeah?
So like, the Project Gotham series was like my favorite franchise for years. And even going back before that, when it was called Metropolis Street Racer on the Dreamcast, that was like, it was like, okay, this is how racing games should be. And then obviously, Forza kind of picked up the mantle. Forza Horizon kind of picked up the mantle from PGR. So no, FH5, the only problem is I only just played Forza Horizon 4 last winter.
Okay.
So I almost need like more time between them.
Right.
But-
Oh, maybe the most gorgeous looking video game I've ever seen in my fucking life, man. Unbelievable.
Absolutely.
Unbelievable. Okay. Awesome. Dude, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for reaching out. Officially a friend of the podcast. Much appreciated.
Absolutely.
You guys look up Doug's stuff in the description box, throw him a follow. And again, as sincerely as I endorse Slay the Spire, I endorse the walkthrough, his book. It is that fucking is just, you guys, I'm telling you, read it. It's so fucking good. So interesting. Doug, thanks for doing this, man. You're the best. Thank you.
Adam, thank you. This was great.
And that's going to do it for this week's episode. Doug, dude, thank you so much for reaching out, for coming on the podcast, and for sharing your story and talking about what it was like to write the guides that so many of us grew up with. I really hope everyone enjoyed this episode as much as I did. You can check out Doug's work, his memoir, The Walkthrough, which I Fucking absolutely recommend. You can pick it up online. It's available digitally, all that kind of stuff. Great book. Just more stories like the ones he told on the podcast today about what it was like being in one of the authors of these strategy guides back in the old days. You can find all of Doug's work at dougwalsh.com. All of his information is in the description of this podcast. If you're interested, cannot recommend checking his stuff out enough. Doug, thanks again, man. That was a lot of fun. Hopefully we can get you back on the show at some point. And to all of you, thank you so much for listening to the show. If you're enjoying the podcast, maybe just consider supporting us on Patreon. And I feel weird asking, but like, it's $2 a month. It helps me keep the lights on and keeps churning these things out. And it's not like you're just giving me $2 like I'm asking for it, on the side of the road. You get 2 additional podcasts every week. Expansion Pass plus Game Patch. Plus you get instant access to the entire back catalog. Over 100 bonus podcasts are sitting there waiting for you. Plus, you can join our Discord channel. Plus, you can DM with me. Plus, you get a shout out on the show. Plus, you can write in and play one, remake one, erase one, and send your comments into all the podcasts and all that kind of stuff. And it's the greatest value probably in the history of the universe. $2 a month, patreon.com/rememberthegame. Thank you all so much. Yeah. I think that's it. I think that'll do it for this episode. I'll be back tomorrow with expansion pass number 82, I think 82 or 83, which will be my spoiler-free Metroid Dread review. I'll be back on Friday with Game Patch with more gaming news, and I'll be back next week with episode 171 of Remember the Game. And I don't know what game it's going to be about yet, but I'll let you know, all right? Thanks for listening, everybody. You guys are the best. I will talk to you all again soon. Cheers. Remember the Game is brought to you by our Patreons. I could not produce all the content I churn out every week without your generosity and support. So I would like to thank everyone that has supported us at patreon.com/rememberthegame. So a huge thank you to Dave, Makeshift Money, Todd, Joe Buck, Ben Drinkin, Sharonic, Andre, Stupid Monkey, Tyler, Michael Mathis, Fake McHugh, Joshua Shenfield, Jeffrey Mathis, Shaylee Keys and his Stupid Arrow Handle, Christopher Sumner, James Clark, King Bahamut, Sean Razine, Dave McGee, DNA Gaming, Joe Gillespie, Nathan Warzica, Ashley Cronenbitter, Ben Bullia, Slick Rick, Doug Dorn, Chris Fleury, Charlie Madero, Scott V, Rex Sheldon, Andrew Wright, Gary C, Divalk, Luca, Kate Roberts. This is gonna be a long fucking shout out. They Call Me Badger, Joe Mack, Desert Tortoise, Jordan Do, How, Kevin Hufford, Jason Cortez, The Good Enough Gamer, Fraser Burns, Brian McKay, Alex Martinez, April Sane, Nick Sills, Vlad Steen, Kyle Paul, Mark 209, Lil Bunny Fufu 89, Matt Brown, Ben Busha, Angry Ticks, Aaron Cuphall, Dan T, Dave Thompson, No One Cares, Mackenzie Wheeler, Brandon O'Brien, Chris Campbell, Chuck Schlarp, Wyman Brooks, Scott Brooks, Leon K, Adam O'Sharello, Dario Omen, Stitch, Aaron Lawson, Miklos Blackshaw, The T-Word, Michael Haig, Mr. Nick, Matt McLean, Brian Ransom, Miles from BringBackRetro.com, White Burrow, Chris Knife 007, Nathan Tremblay, Mark Jones, A-Town, Andre SJ Flash, Brian Medeiros, Tom Kite, Danny Vega, David Ray, Geek Life Radio, Morgan, Ryan Yeager, John Quack, Zane Donovan, Adam J, S2S, Jer Bear, Arpad Botos, Ryan Kinchin, Tommy Reynolds, Defunct, Mike Maloney, Christopher Russell, Ryan Bayshore, X Water, Vincent L, Very Cool Dude, Jay Clutch, Starl Probin, Tim Riel, The Giraffe, Jared, PB McFadden, G9PSX, Tim L, Dominic S. Thompson, Martin Greenwood, David Schnatterer, Wolverine Films, Peebs, Silver Grunion, Mr. Satan, Raging Demon, Poops Loomis, 8-Bit Bovie, Pat Duddy, MPG in Buffalo, James Anderson, Amy Gillen, Dana Witcherall, That One Kid Nick, Potato Bob Guy, Mad Shibs, Mercury 869, Derek Jane, Rodrigo Tomazzi, Kelly, Pie Messiah, The Honest Pokemon Trainer, Bracken Newcomb, Zoo Troy, M. Felf, A Novel Console, Kayfabe 5150, Example Text, AJ Jones, JB Retromania, Ferdy Martinez, Troy Kazuniuk, Brandon Hine, Boognish, Wolfgang Darren, Ninja Lunchbox 79, Mr. Meeseeks 0406, Derpamus Prime, Seriously Ron P, Sam Wright, Retro Bismol, Andy Hudson, John Byrne 86, Paul Bullard, Joshua Davis, Stefan Fukasawa, Thor the Hammered, Kinslayer, Rogue Agent, Jafar, McJr., McMegaman 2 OG, Good A, Goth C, Dane, Aaron Baker, Lord Finish, K-Jam, Electronics Emotions Program, Chris Copland, Spencer C. Weiss, Mandingo 2021, Cody Poland, JMC, Logan Hale, Doogie, Matt McLean, Pizza Power, Super Nintendo Dudes, Nathan Freak, Mike Burks, Trevor Seven Oaks, Ryan McCowan, Kerry Waka Waka, Fob, Paul Zoe, Wolf Magic 21. There's still 200 of these. Johnny CCDC, Joe LeBlanc, Raul Aguiar, I Worked at Subway, David Phillips, Corey Street, Gary Heather, Carmichael Nicholas, Squints, John DeShazo, Tense Sparkster, Omega 88, Swedish Fish, Nathaniel Shelley, Explode Processing, Tim Chambo, Chowdy Lowdy, Joseph Gonzalez, Dan Wagner, Daniel McKee, Candido, K Cuz, Guest House Productions, Bones 02, S2 Von 5000, Titan 420, Jose E. Marco, Seth Mayfield, Tom Calvert, Chris Freeman, Scarlett, Zonko 504, Lee Sparks, Sharp J, Oprah's Iron Fist, Tom Maya, Adam Ferrer, Russell Aldridge, Chris Dory, Classic Crusade, Big G, Astral Soul, Shannon Willis, Scott Roseberry, Karth from KOTOR, Sean Radford, Chance McCoy, Josh Valentini, Hammond Egger, Ronnie Sachs, PK, Jeff Bergeron, Ian Watts, Dale Baker, Joe Kirby, Captain N, Owen the Game Furchuck, Super Dave, Plucky Beast, Matthew Day, Broken Spoilers, Harmonies David, Game Nomad Misi, Tristan, Jerry Robinson, Emily Luna, Kenneth Michael Brown, Leigh Evans, Daniel Stidham, Darth Obvious, Master Boyd, Leon Nabskog, Trapper Keeper 1000, Daniel, Astro Alpaca, Rob Strothman, Ryan Groinus, Kaiser Dragon, PP Poo Poo Cuckoo Pants, Kyle Dodd, Jared Boshlin, Stu Bergerick, Eden Awaits 1981, Tunable Power, Borrow, The Gray Bearded One, Dan Taylor, Swanee, Hayes 87, Lukey Mull, Look, fuck me, there's still 100 of these. It's easy until I lose my train of... The second my brain thinks about anything, I'm fucked. As long as all I do is just blindly read the names off the spreadsheet, we've made it. We got 107 to go. Let's go. It's like the Pokey Rap. Danny Proudfoot, John Woodruff, Angel Cortez, Dusty Salad, Chris Meisner, Randy Barrage, Neo Nevis, Andy Spilling, Brian Spreitzer, Michael Clark, Chalupa Cabra, Thomas Simmons, Sean Byron, Rocker Dude, Saskatchewan River Pirate, What Great Gaming, Mikey NL83, I Am the Mutt, Juga, Sony Kid Magazine, Brian Sherborne, Joseph Champetti, Just a Fish, Adam Stank, Bagalazino, Noob Q, Beth, Rob Kinsley, Benny MB, Vomit the Soul, Strife 89, Thermopolis. Oh, fucking email just popped up on my computer and that distracted me. Thermopolis, Paul Rutkowski, Liam, Micah Veal, Chris Daniels, Gareth Dunn, Matt Denzalo, Spicy Mortician, King Kazaro 64, Davey Boy, Michael Bayshore, Eric Chevenius, Holmes, Ryan Gibbons, Dan S., Adam Goldstein, Vigo the Butch, Austin Urisetti, Nemo Sandoval, Matthew Centrone, Hostile Badger, Zach Shepard, Stefan, Ballsack Teabagger, Black Silver, Billy Mumphrey's Downfall, Rico Argentieri, Brian W., Chris Dickin, Jungle Dumpster, Jay Hampton, Rage Mo, Thomas G., Man a Few Words, Hans Gruber, Dylan Flora, Jackson M., Joseph Oblivion, Craig Sutherland, Rob Serino, Matthew D'Amico, Daja 1K1T, John Colossi, Quest, Gregory Harvey, Stephen Lewis, Yankee Doodle Randy, Bobo, Clayton Robertson, Jason Sika, Andrew Logus, Darth Yako, Alan M., Backdraft Delta, Frosty Feet 492, Scott A. Baker, Britt O'Neill, Riley Jones, Justin Lemieux, Michael Spiro, Jonathan Graham, Brady Wolf, Mecha Robo Hamster, Navigate, which I know I fucked up, Michael Phillips, Brandon Griffiths, Stefan Rucher, 1.21 gigawatts, Thomas Cheney, Hulk Hogan's brother, Chris Larkin, Evan O'Brien, Clinton Smith, the Mustard Tiger, and Chris Cantrell. Holy shit, 7 minutes. If you made it to the end of this, you're a beast. Thank you all so much for the support. I really appreciate it. And if you signed up in October and didn't get in that shout out, I only record it once a month, so I'll record it again at the beginning of November. But thank you all so much. You guys are the best. Holy cow. I'm gonna go drink some water. I'll talk to you again soon. Cheers.